Go. Hey guys, welcome to the art show. This time with Tim and Pete, or Pete and Tim. This is Peter Yong.
G'day.
Former CDW teacher.
Yes.
And current sort of awesome artist working on various things. So yeah, Pete's in town. He taught a holiday workshop for, mostly for, I think, sort of high school age students and that sort of thing. We run sort of, shorter courses like that in the holidays so that, people who are into art can kind of come along and, take a shorter course in the holidays and sort of get into drawing a bit, which is really cool. And you taught one of those over the weekend. And so we thought, let's have Pete actually in the hot seat.
That's right.
For realsy.
Well, yeah, I'm here for a week, so...
yeah, cool. So I thought what we do is we do, the normal show that we do, except it'll be me and Pete as opposed to me and Simon. And the discussion topic I thought that we'd go over is about doing personal projects. So one of the things that, you've done is sort of kickstarted a comic book that you kind of wrote and drew and did the whole thing, and you kickstarted it from soup to nuts, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to have someone in here who's been through that process, just talk about the ins and outs of that, and because I think it's definitely a reality these days that you can, anyone can do it essentially. That's what they tell you, and I've sort of had some experience doing this with some sort of card games, and we also know a lot of our friends have sort of done this as well. Pretty much the vast majority of the people we kind of like our close friends have all actually run Kickstarter campaigns in the last few years. So sort of interesting. It seems like it happens more and more. But before we do that, we should just what have you been doing? Okay. But besides teaching workshops.
Okay.
What have you been working on?
Oh, so
so let's check out the Photoshop thing, and if you want to swap to that screen, so show us what you've been doing.
In the workshop? So this is what I did in the workshop.
Yeah, just whatever. Yeah. What's new and exciting?
Well,
and then we'll talk about Kickstarter stuff.
Because I was on the Twitch stream only a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I talked about what I've done job wise and stuff. So I just want to go through what I did in my workworkshop. So
in the holiday workshop.
In the holiday workshop. So the first day was like I just went through my process of drawing. From gesture drawing to kind of like finish line drawing. I'm more of a, drawer person.
As am I.
And my background's like animation. So a lot of the work I do is just line drawing.
Line drawings,
and a basic tone.
Well, especially when you're doing, storyboards and stuff like that.
It's super line intensive and drawing intensive, and really no one cares about painting much. No. It's a nice skill to have and to think about, but it's not super necessary. And even when I do design work, I don't get asked to color things much. Sure. It's mostly just like, just give us a drawing.
Because that's what you're known for, I guess. Or
I guess so. It's what I'm comfortable at doing, and just
often when you're doing design, you don't really need to add color, that much, depending on what you're doing. But so what did you get up to in the? So
this is from the second day, and in the second day I talked a bit about design. Just pretty basic stuff, but fun stuff as well. So one thing we talked about in this exercise, or this demo, was a demo in shape design. So I wanted to get something like a character that we know, and then change his shape design from something that's like quite spiky and and mean to something that's like soft and round.
Right. But still keep the same recognizable character.
But try and keep the character recognizable in some way.
Which is a task you would, I think that's an actual legit sort of task you might get as a designer.
Probably.
Like often people come up with sort of like, a chibi sort of, super cartoony manga version of, insert major, property here. And that's something you have to do. And it's like, how do I turn, a Balrog or, Vlad the Impaler into a cute little guy?
Well, I mean, if they wanted to make a line of toys, like cute And so many properties have done this.
Yeah, exactly.
Cute face hugger. That's a thing.
Yeah,
I didn't think that would be a thing, but that's a thing now. So
that means anything.
They've made the face hugger into a plush toy. Which I think is pretty awesome. So it's definitely things that people do. But I also think it's a fun exercise. I really enjoy doing this demo. It's something I've done probably since I started teaching. It's just really fun. Cool. So obviously I grabbed the Butcher from Diablo. He's a demon.
Right. Because I didn't know who this character was. Obviously I don't play enough Diablo.
He was from the first game. He was like the first boss you fight, but then his design changed quite a bit in the new games. But anyway.
Yeah, so you turned him into chibi version
into like a cuter.
Yep. Cool.
So I was trying to like pretty much everything about him I was trying to round out. That's like the exercise.
Yeah.
And make him a little bit less intimidating, even to the point of like his little pose. Yeah. His little legs kind of turning in.
Cool.
So I did that. That was really fun. The next one I did was I asked the students. I was like, well, what can I do next?
Which is always a tricky proposition.
It is.
Yeah.
And they said Totoro, and I was like, he's perfect because he's just round shapes, but at the same time, he's my childhood. Yeah. But this was really fun as well.
So what was that? You took Totoro. Or Totoro.
Yep.
And
I made him like
angular.
So
which is tricky because he's.
I don't know if anyone's. I should have talked about this, but I don't know if anyone's heard this before. But in like design fundamentals, we talk about three. Pretty much everything can be broken down to three shapes: squares, triangles, and circles. So that's what the basis for this is. So Totoro is mainly circular shapes, isn't he? So I tried to bring his shape language very circular, and I tried to make it into like triangle or triangular shapes, and seeing what that does to his whole personality.
To his personality. Cool.
So so I did Totoro.
What else did you get up to?
And then the next one was was Winnie the Pooh. So he's
Winnie the Pooh.
So he's like
a round roly poly.
He's like a round roly poly character, and I try to put more square, like make his shape language to like more kind of square. Kind of.
And I guess he's like pear shaped, and you've sort of tried to make
him
the opposite.
And try to think about making him like more heroic. Because with circular shapes we think of like more appealing, cute characters. With triangular shapes we think of more kind of villainous or scary,
like active.
Characters, and then square shapes we think about strong. Like obviously in lots of shows and stuff we see heroes that have very square like features. I mean, you think of Optimus Prime. He's just
a box. He's a couple of boxes.
That's what we're talking about. I don't know about. I mean, new Optimus Prime in the movies. He's still a box.
He's like 10 trillion triangles.
He's a lot of noise.
Many triangles.
Perhaps in kind of a square like silhouette.
Everything in Transformers is not made of three shapes. It's made of 10 trillion sharp, jagged triangles. Everything. Every single thing.
Yes. But if you look at the 80s cartoon, definitely he's just box.
Totally.
Which is a great example of this.
And also like if you look at the other Transformers from the 80s sort of designs, is they're actually slightly different designs. You know what I mean? You had the Bumblebee character was the round sort of like VW bug. I think he was a bug. Which is completely different sort of design language. And you had like the Soundwave was like, that was the guy who was the plane. Who's that guy? The bad guy.
Soundwave was the tape.
Right.
You're thinking of.
That's right.
You're thinking of. What's his name?
The guy that was the plane. Starscream.
The treacherous, the openly treacherous.
And like I just remember that like the shapes were very different. You know what I mean? So you could really, which is funny that they kind of lost that completely, almost. But anyway, let's not start being negative about Transformers, because I quite like Transformers. I think it is.
What, the new movies?
Yeah, I think it's a triumph of design and execution.
You could say that.
It's a very pure vision.
Okay.
One of the purest, I'd say.
Okay.
Yep.
I haven't watched. I haven't watched. I've only watched the first movie, and I haven't watched any.
Oh yeah, I've watched all of them.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
They're great.
It's really impressive.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm all in. Anyway,
You're all in.
I digress. Transformers 7. Here we come.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Piglet as well.
So I did Piglet.
Oh, no.
So again, Piglet, round, cute shapes, very cute, and let's make him harsh and triangular. And
but he does have that kind of, the round sort of stripes, which are a bit sort of aggressive to a certain degree. Like lots of things which have stripes are sort of aggressive.
Oh yeah.
Like like bees and.
Oh yeah.
Like.
True.
So it's like it translates a little bit into sort of when you sort of make him like this,
it looks even scarier. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's quite terrifying.
Yep. Cool.
Especially those hip bones. There's something about that. When I drew it, I was like, that makes me
just
feel
that little bit,
and I like it.
Yeah. So those hip bones are in stark contrast to what Pete has, Pete's magnum opus, Rockabilly Plump Corpse.
Yes.
Or Rockabilly Plump Core.
Rockabilly Plump Core. Yeah.
And so just talk about like Kickstarter stuff.
Yep.
Or starting your own project, because I think that's what we want to spend the most time sort of really discussing. We will do some critiques. We'll do a critique session, and then we might do a demo kind of after that. But the main thing I want to talk about is just it's just the fact that you kind of made this book, and you kind of literally made you did every single bit of it.
Yes.
The graphic design, was it like?
Yep.
You put like together the cover.
The only thing I didn't do was the cover painting.
Yeah. So the cover painting was done by
a guy called Hunter Schultz.
Yep.
Who is a friend of mine. And he's also a really good concept artist. He was like the senior character designer.
Yep. Of
Mortal Kombat 9, 10, and Injustice.
Yep.
For NetherRealms.
Yep.
I just asked him. I was like, "Can you? If I did a drawing, would you like to paint it up?"
And he went to town. And he went pretty crazy.
Yeah, he did.
He went
which is great
to the nth degree. So you can check out. I think we pasted the link to Pete's Kickstarter campaign into the chat initially. If you guys scroll up, you can maybe see that. And that'll allow you to see some of the art from the book kind of a bit closer up, so you can sort of see see what it looks like. But I just think it's like it is interesting times in terms of being a creative and having Kickstarter as a possibility. As I said, like a couple of our friends, who we when you're in Adelaide, we kind of hang out a fair bit. We know a couple of people who've made games on Kickstarter.
Yep.
That have turned out to be very successful. Other people who have done sort of comics through Kickstarter. Yep. I've been on 2 board games that were through Kickstarter. I think what we had like sort of Hunters of Arkfall, which was do you reckon you could type that into there? Hunters of Arkfall. Yeah. So that was a game I sort of did all the card art, and similar to what you did, I kind of ended up doing a lot of the graphic design of the of the box and the cards and that sort of thing. Now I collaborated with someone, so I don't feel like I've done the full Kickstarter experience, but I've certainly been around them, and I sort of know a little bit about how they sort of progress, and it's super interesting, and I think actually like a really good way forward. You know what I mean? And certainly it does seem like the more Kickstarters you do, if you actually deliver on what you say you're going to do, that that makes a difference these days. And I think it is certainly something that's worth thinking about if you're an artist these days, and you have some sort of you want to do something that is something that you perhaps could either by yourself or maybe with one other person. If that's something you can actually make, which is many things, then it's totally viable to consider that as a career, potentially. Do you know what I mean? But talk about, I guess, like how did this happen? Why did this happen?
Why did
Pete?
this happen? Well,
why did you make a book called The Rockabilly Plump Core?
Because I wanted to make a comic forever, and I made books Made a few sketchbooks and I printed them myself.
Yep.
Probably did about 3 of them.
Yep.
Before this, and that was really good. But I always knew in the back of my mind that the end goal was to make my own comic book. You know.
Yep.
And
so how long ago? Like forever? Like since you were like a little kid, sort of. Was this a thing, or? Well,
I think you know my biggest reason for becoming an artist was to be a comic artist.
Right. Yep.
You know? I think that was my biggest kind of motivation or maybe goal.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But I don't know. But then you know I kind of like, and I've always been a fan of comics.
Well, there was. Let's just see. There was no probably. You know, Pete's from Brisbane originally. There was certainly there's no cool school in Australia, let alone Brisbane, that's like the comic book artist school.
Oh, no.
Come here to become a comic book artist, and we'll take care of you and teach you how that business works. You know what I mean? I don't think that exists
in Australia.
Yeah, certainly in Australia, but you know, probably not anywhere really. I think there's a couple, but anyway. So you sort of did animation.
I did animation, which was also something I was really into. Yeah. Yeah, and there was so I studied animation at the Queensland College of Art, and even then I was like, you know, I think Supernova had literally just started.
Right.
When I was in second year uni.
Wow.
And the first one was actually in Brisbane.
And Supernova is like an Australian comic book convention.
It's pop culture convention.
Yep.
And and that was the first time I met some like big comic artists.
Right. Yeah. Cool.
I grew up with,
because that was a big thing. You know what I mean? I feel like the internet has made proximity to stars and you know people who you might be like really inspired by. It's like almost like, well, you can kind of talk to them a bit, but you know that was literally the only way you could probably ever interact with someone was to go to a comic convention and be like, hey.
Yeah, and it was really quite cool actually. Yeah.
Yep.
So I met Mark Bagley, who was a massive fan of his work on Spider-Man.
Yep.
I was into Spider-Man when I was a kid, and he was probably my favorite Spider-Man artist.
Yep.
There was many Spider-Man comics at that time. I think there was there might have been like 8 different Spider-Man comics
at least.
And he'd the Amazing Spider-Man,
which is one of the real main ones, the Amazing Spider-Man. I think
probably. I to be honest, I read.
You just looked at the art.
Well, yes, and I read one story. It was called Maximum Carnage. It was kind of a big deal.
Yep.
Back in the day, they made a video game about it. And I read it, and I thought it was trash.
Oh yeah.
The story, I thought it was just complete trash. But Mark Bagley in particular was fantastic.
Yep.
But after that, it kind of put me off Marvel comics.
Right.
Reading them because I was very lucky because I was exposed to British comics like 2000 AD and a few mangas as well. My brothers were into it, and so mangas like Battle Angel Alita and Akira and Ghost in the Shell.
Yep.
I was reading that at the same time, and I was like, that's Maximum Carnage.
Oh, this is? Yeah.
Yeah,
so
that is
actually bring up
Maximum Carnage,
on the screen. So that's Mark Bagley?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is, sort of like 90s Marvel?
Yeah.
Like before...
Jim Lee was big.
Jim Lee. So this was before Image? Or was it after Image?
After Image, I think.
After Image.
Yep. And I did get into Spawn quite a bit, actually.
Yep.
So I wouldn't say all American comics, but I really like Spawn.
Yep. Yeah, cool.
Oh, and I like Preacher as well. But all that stuff was all British writers.
Right.
They call it the British invasion
of
the 90s. Preacher. What else was there at that time? Watchmen, Alan Moore.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, that was more 80s, I think. That was a bit before this. Steve Dillon and Garth Ennis. Garth Ennis is an amazing writer. He's one of my favorite comic writers.
So you obviously were like sort of into that stuff back then, and you were sort of saying, that's obviously what I want to do, but because you live in Australia and because, you know, just in general, it was like, that's probably not going to happen. Like it wasn't. Because when you got into animation, were you like, I'm just going to work in animation for 1 year and then, you know, fly to San Diego Comic Convention and
Yeah,
do my folio and become a superstar.
I kind of thought about that.
Draw Spider-Man.
I kind of thought about that, but then I don't know. I think hearing about the comic industry,
right? Yeah.
And it's not.
Yep.
It's not really an easy way to make a living at all.
It's not. No.
And also, I think maybe I wanted to be in a studio.
Right,
I
be around people and
I'd be experienced being in a studio, and I really enjoyed that.
Right.
At that time,
so you just kind of went with that because that was happening, and
and I think my work wasn't good enough.
Okay,
it flat out was like not great,
right?
And I was like, I want to be surrounded by by people I can learn from.
Sure, yeah.
I think at that time I was like, jeez,
Cool.
I think that was my priority.
But there would have been, so there was a point at which, and you sort of just started working on various things, but there was a point, it did seem, where you were kind of like, no, I'm making my comic, and I don't know whether you named it the Rockabilly Plump Core, or not, but you kind of started drawing that was the first thing. That was like the first thing. So it was kind of like a high concept piece. Yes. Like a high concept intellectual property pitch. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And so then you sort of, because I remember you were sort of drawing some of the characters maybe before you kind of really were like, I'm going to actually do a comic.
Well, I think a big thing was that when I was in America, I made a bunch of storyboard sequences. And they taught me a lot about just like story structure and making.
Yeah. So this is when you went to like the USA. Yeah. You did some courses at CDA, Concept Design Academy.
Yep.
On storyboarding, and we talked a little bit about this before. And I think it was probably that. Like I feel like you always wanted to do story stuff. Do you know what I mean? And you had been doing sort of concept design stuff, and you really wanted to do storyboarding, which is what you're doing now, living the dream, literally living the dream.
I think I'm
literally.
I have two jobs right now, and one of them's drawing comics.
Yep.
Drawing these like usually 2-panel comics.
Yep.
For a game called Clash Royale.
Yep. So that's sort of drawing comics for a video game sort of company about video games. Yep. But still
about the game they're making, because they have all these whole series of characters, which are they're really fun. But I think they want to add more kind of like story and personality into them.
Yep.
So that's one job, and then my second job.
Are there any of those online that people can Google?
Be, actually, if you go to, I think they're even on Instagram.
Yeah, on your Instagram.
No, on the Clash Royale Instagram. Okay,
well, I'll find them.
And then my second job is storyboarding on a yet to be announced DreamWorks TV show.
Right.
It'll be on Netflix.
And previously you were storyboarding on
The Adventures of Puss in Boots.
On The Adventures of Puss in Boots.
Yep.
Cool.
Which was a really fun show. I really liked the character of Puss in Boots. He's super appealing.
Yep.
And it was a very cinematic show, so
Yep.
Yeah, there's one.
Here we go. Here's one on the Instagram. Cool.
Yeah.
72,000 likes.
It's a popular game.
Well done.
It's a very popular game.
Awesome.
I wish that was completely attributed to me. I don't think it is, because no one knows I draw.
What is this one? Well, this is just...
So they have...
This is just a JPEG that says the first update sneak peek, and that has 93,000 likes. So... Yeah. But that's pretty cool. And it's good to get that exposure. I mean, I'm guessing that your name is not pasted all over it.
No.
Which is sort of like, which I guess is interesting, because I feel like, again, a lot of the time people do comics because they want to do their own story, you know what I mean? And it's actually, I would say what you're doing is quite rare to probably be paid, what I'm assuming is like fairly well to do a comic for someone else. That's actually quite rare these days. So it's interesting to kind of have that, thing where it's like, here's a book that you created completely by yourself. You can do whatever. Here's something where, your name doesn't even get to be on it, but, you probably get sort of paid, which is similar to, probably what people were doing back in the 70s and that sort of thing for a lot of those Marvel comics, and
probably,
where you weren't getting it wasn't a creator-owned sort of
environment. But even in the the style is kind of something that they have kind of developed
Yep.
previously.
Yep.
And I'm just kind of,
you're able to fit into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is probably, that maybe, because I think something interesting about comics is that style is such a strong element of a comic book artist's identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, the concept of sort of like a modern day comic book artist drawing in someone else's style is a bit like not done almost. It's sort of like, no, I have my style.
Yep.
But probably I feel like you're like an experienced sort of like artist who is used to working professionally.
Well,
and like being like, I'll just draw that, I'll draw this. I'll draw that.
Well, the thing is, I'm so used to that working in animation.
Draw this thing.
Yeah.
For this model sheet.
Yep. And it's like, and that was really easy for me. And it's a good job, and they're really great to work with.
Yep.
These guys.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah.
So was it working on so many sort of like, you were saying you kind of got to a point where you kind of maybe realized you could draw a comic? It was kind of like, was there a point at which you were like, oh, hey,
yeah,
I forgot I wanted to draw comics.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, I did a storyboard. That's kind of like a comic.
Yep.
I want to do this.
It was absolutely
There's nothing
like
stopping.
That. It was just like that. It was like, because literally I made these like, probably about 4 sequences, 400 panel each.
Yep.
Kind of sequences, in a pretty like what?
Are any of those online?
No.
Let's not. We won't go there.
It's one on YouTube. My website's in a bit of a mess right now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
That's embarrassing.
Because I started making a new one, and then
and then you
got a whole bunch of work.
That's what happens. Is often people who are quite successful have terrible old websites because it's just like, I'm getting too much work. I don't have time. It's
pretty annoying actually. But I need to put stuff up on it. But anyway, I was like, if I can do that, I can do a goddamn comic, because it's like
nothing's stopping you.
Nothing's stopping me. Like, surely I can do that. And then I literally drew a picture of this rockabilly guy in my comic. In my sketchbook.
Yep.
And I wrote Rockabilly Plumpcore.
Yep. Above it.
Next to him.
Yeah.
I thought,
that's a comic.
That name's ridiculous. And then I drew another picture of this swole dude.
Yep.
And I wrote Dr. Swole, PhD.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, look at these two guys. I'm like, what would happen if they met?
Yep.
And I just like, that was literally how I started with the idea. And then during that time, I was like watching some bodybuilding videos on YouTube, and it's just such a weird kind of subculture.
Yep.
And I found it super interesting. I think there was a Louis Theroux documentary about bodybuilders from the 90s.
Yep.
That's super interesting about that subculture, and goes into female bodybuilding and whatnot. Yep. There was a documentary called Generation Iron, I think, which is a very interesting documentary.
Sure.
Anyway, so I was just looking at that stuff. I found it super fascinating.
Yep. And it is. It's like some of that stuff is larger than life.
Oh yeah.
Because I've looked at a lot of that as well.
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, I watch a lot of. I read a lot of audiobooks and listen to a lot of stuff, and people are often like, "How do you know about all this random stuff?" And it's just like, I don't know. You read as an artist, you kind of it's like I'm a freelancer. I have plenty of time to, not plenty of time, but you kind of do just go down little life rat holes where you're like, that is really weird.
That's really weird.
There's people getting really buff and that's fascinating.
Taking growth hormone.
That's like, what is going on there?
Bulbous bellies from it.
Yep.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's like, dissing current day bodybuilding.
Yep. Yeah, it is. It is super interesting, and especially because, like, as an artist, I mean, I think one of the obvious reason you were looking at that stuff is for reference.
Yeah.
Right? So you sort of
because I was into like superhero stuff.
Yep.
And the obviously what they were getting the proportions for superheroes was from bodybuilders of the day.
Yes.
Like the 70s.
Yeah.
Even the 1990s. It was only the mid 90s where they started getting kind of crazy.
The bodybuilders got too muscly for Superman.
Yeah. Well, they started becoming mass monsters, as it's a pretty common term, as opposed to like as
opposed to they
sort proportioned.
They sort of lost that kind of, because I think again, like, you know, this is the kind of stuff that I'll start talking about, because I talk about, you know, there's like there's lots of like products out there that talk about, you know, how it's like the Adonis sort of principle, which is where you want to have basically your neck and your bicep and your calf should all be the same size.
Oh,
and
really?
I think that's what people talked about this, like that
I'm
sort
sure
of like, and that was like the traditional kind of Mr. Atlas style thing, where like that's what you were aiming for. And I think maybe like, did Schwarzenegger have that? Like when Schwarzenegger was like on like the typical Arnold Schwarzenegger that everyone thought about, that's like sort of what he had, like his, you know, his like bicep, calf, neck was like the same size. Or anyway, there's like the, you know,
something like that, I'm sure.
But these are things you, as an artist, it's like you need to know that. That's important because if you're like, what will make someone look sort of athletic but chunky, and at what point does they just look like, sort of too big, you know? And it's like, well, you just make sure these things line up, and you know, so you were sort of doing that.
Well, yeah, because I mean, because it's kind of a freak show now. It's just like, oh my god, it's like that is
So part of the comic is like it's
kind of poking fun at that.
Yeah, and because the bad guys are kind of bodybuilders.
Yes.
And the good guys are plump, rockabilly, secret agent types
who love eating.
Yeah, who love eating.
Who love having fun.
Yep.
And these guys are just like super serious.
Yep. And so no one edited this idea. No one was like,
no, that's.
Are you sure?
Yes. Yep. and I think that was a big part of it. It was like, let's have this idea. It's crazy idea, and let's just go for it.
Go for it.
Like, what would happen? Like literally just, and I think, and that was kind of my approach to some of those storyboards. You know, I was just like, man, and
I'm here. I can draw this. If I can draw it, it can happen.
Yeah, and it was, and that's part of the exercise. It was like, because I feel like, you know, ideas aren't that important.
No,
but it's executing them.
Yeah,
you know, absolutely. And how can you execute that in an interesting way?
Yep.
You know, I think ideas are pretty cheap. To be
well,
honest.
I mean, one of the things, again, if people are, we did have one question in the chat, which is kind of, how do you start out getting freelance work, and what do you look for when finding freelance work, and you know, like, so from quick commissions to, you know, doing sort of artwork for studios, we can maybe touch on that in a sec.
Yep.
But because again, like, I think we sort of talked a little bit about that when you were sort of on before, is like how to get freelance sort of, you know, gigs and stuff like that. But we'll maybe touch that when we're going over the critiques and stuff like that. Anyway, yeah, so it is, I think that's very true, is like the idea is kind of, it's I think when you're doing a personal project, it feels like part of where you did this is you're just like, I like drawing bodybuilders.
Yes.
I like drawing plump rockabilly people.
Yes.
I like drawing stupid
things.
Shit.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And that's like, it's not, I feel like many people may see this book and be like, Pete, are you okay? I'm like, you're very self-aware of how sort of silly it is.
Oh, yeah.
And that's like, you're like, this is the best.
Yeah.
You know? So it's not like someone's like, does he realize that's not very serious? Yes, Pete knows this is not serious.
Well, I mean, that's the whole, because you know, again, it was like, you know, you do so much work. You know, I've been working for like 10 years when I started this.
Yep.
And I'm like, what do I have to call just mine?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What represents like,
which is very few things when you've been working, you know, for freelance and studios. You know what I mean? Yep. It's like, it is kind of terrifying when you can go past and be like, phew, you know, I feel like I did all this stuff, but A, I can't show any of it, and B,
how much have I actually done?
Yeah.
How much can I call my own?
Yep.
You know, and I just felt, you know, I'd been freelancing for probably like 5 years.
Yep.
And I did, so, you know, I did have like time sometimes.
Yep.
Like downtime, waiting for feedback, waiting for work. So I need to keep myself busy. I didn't just want to be sitting down doing nothing all day.
Yeah, totally.
So that was another thing. I was like, I was like, this is the perfect time for me to do this.
Yep.
Let's do it.
And it did seem at that point, and I don't know, I mean, you can tell me to stop sort of like narrating your life, but I feel like, because I was like, we were hanging out a fair bit at that time.
Yep.
But it did seem that it's kind of probably like, I feel like you went to CDA and you kind of came back, and I feel like you got your freelance stuff going pretty well. And it was kind of like, oh, I kind of have this handled, right? Like you sort of had work, and it's like, I keep having work, you know what I mean? What's next? You know what I mean? It was sort of like, how can I keep challenging myself? Because that's one of the scary things as well, you know, is often, you know, we sort of work so much to get to a certain point, you sort of get there, and then it's like, how do I regain that energy where, you know, like, I want to work in storyboarding so bad, you know, and you're just kind of like working at it all day. So this is like a good way to kind of get back on that like constant challenge.
Definitely.
Yeah, because it was a challenge, you know what I mean? That's like even just doing a, you know, a small amount of comic stuff is a challenge.
And I was also kind of, I think another inspiring thing was, you know, like comics are like, it was like a storyboard, but technically you can make a whole feature film by yourself.
Yeah.
And there was a few comics that I was kind of reading, and you could kind of tell that they were literally making a comic to be made into a feature film.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Mark Miller. He actually has a whole comic company called Miller World, and I think he's recently sold all his properties to Netflix.
Right.
Like, all of them.
And
so they're all going to be made into TV shows or something. But some of his comic books, they're actually made, or they're...
Yeah, you can tell.
You can tell that they're like, this is the structure of a movie. And I was like, that is cool. That like two people can make a movie by themselves.
Totally.
I was like, that is the coolest thing.
And it is like, you know, I mean, when someone picks up, you know, Rockabilly Plump Core the movie, you still have the comic, right? And that's what they say is like, you know, if you're developing an IP, people use the term IP, and I'm always like, don't you want to make a thing, not like an amorphous IP? But you know, when you're sort of doing a book, it's like, if they make that thing and it's not very good, which often happens, you still have the book, right? You can still hold it up and say, yeah, but I made this, which I think is always sort of good.
It's really,
as opposed to, you know, if you're just pitching a movie and then the movie falls through, it's like you got nothing. Or if the movie goes ahead and it's terrible, you know what I mean? You've kind of just got to be like, well, that wasn't my fault. Whereas you've always got this. It's like your pure vision. So let's just quickly talk, because we're going a little bit over time, which I realize, but that's all right. But let's just talk about the process of Kickstarting. So at some point there was like, you were like, I'm going to make a comic. It was never intended to be a Kickstarter. Never intended to be a Kickstarter.
And I think I'd worked on it for about 6 months. And I went to PAX. And I told someone, it was a random dude at one of the PAX game parties. I said, I'm making a comic. He's like, oh, you should just Kickstart it. Just Kickstart it. And I was like,
so it's literally just random dude at a party.
Just totally random. I don't even know who it was. And then it actually got me. I was like, why don't I Kickstart?
Why don't I?
I've got the content. It's like such a great idea. Anyway, so I did it, and the idea for doing it was because I saw all these kind of successful Kickstarters happening, and there's a guy called Jake Parker who's done a whole bunch of comic Kickstarters, and there's a bunch of guys who have done it. And I thought, you know, I've made a lot of the content for it. Why don't I just do it? And then if I want to do another one in the future, I've already made one that's been successful. It'll make people kind of trust me more. You know, so I have that option. As well. To do another one. Like, why not?
So were you? Because there's a question in the chat about, or like just sort of a comment about sort of, you know, like essentially thinking about like you want to do something, and then perhaps like worrying about someone saying, oh my god, this guy wants to do a comic about, you know, like plump rockabilly guys. That's the dumbest thing ever. Like, you're so dumb, Pete. You know? Was that a worry? Like, was that maybe no?
I don't care, because I don't care what people. I don't care what people think.
Pete's pretty good. Pete's very zen. I feel like he has a very good approach to just being like, I want to draw this thing. And you talked a lot about that as well, about the fact that you kind of really found enjoyment in drawing once you realize, no, I'm going to draw what I want. Not like giant.
But I also found it really funny when I had the idea, when it was just like an idea, and I'd tell people, I was like, I want to do a comic, and people were like, oh yeah, what's a comic? And I said, the Rockabilly Plump Core. It would be like, whoa, and they would like crack up, and they were like, and they were kind of like, I don't think he's actually going to do that. But then when I made it into a Kickstarter, like, people didn't really question it. Much. It was kind of maybe because they were like, they'd seen how much effort I put into it. They were like, maybe like they felt it'd be rude or something.
Look, I think the thing is, it's like, if you're at that party and like probably everyone's like, hey, I'm gonna do a comic, or hey, I'm gonna make a game, or I'm gonna write a movie. Like that's that joke is like, lots of people are sort of, you'll often have some like retired, like some doctor at a cocktail party, and he's like, sipping on champagne, is like, I'd like to be an author too. I think I'm going to write a book when I retire.
Yep.
And the writer says like, oh, that's funny because I think I'm going to become a doctor when I retire. That's like, fuck you. You know, this is hard. It's hard to actually do it. Yes. You know what I mean? And there's like thinking about it, and then there's doing it.
Yep.
And everyone talks about it, and it's kind of funny. But when you do it, I feel like, you had the art. It's not like you were like, I have this idea for a book. You had pages, you had a significant portion of stuff done. And I think that kind of, to a certain degree, that silences a lot of critics. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Especially that maybe if it became insanely popular, you'd probably have lots of critics. It'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe this thing. But if you're just doing
this
a
is a reflection of our society.
Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Everyone wants to have a crack. But yeah, I think most of the time you're not going to get any kickback from that. So what was the process of, going through that sort of Kickstarter thing?
Well, I was very lucky to have Brecken here in CDW. Brecken's like our CW video guy.
Yep.
And he was really like supportive and was like, oh man, I think it's so cool you're doing that. And he just like took a Sunday of his time.
Yep.
I wrote this script of like with the Kickstarter video, and he went over it with me.
Yep.
And then he sat down with me and coerced me into talking like a human being in front of the camera, which I hate doing.
Which is tricky.
Which is very hard.
Yep.
And then he did a quick edit of it together, and then I like went into After Effects and did some drawings and did some stupid effects and learned how to do that.
Yeah. So you made the Kickstarter video.
Yeah, because I thought that was an important part of it, especially being a complete unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it seemed like with the Kickstarter as well, like you were sort of, you weren't like saying, I want $100,000 to make a book. No. Like you didn't necessarily, like you kind of just wanted it to cover printing costs and just kind of, sort of get it out there a bit like that. So
I thought it would be too much pressure if I was like, I want you to fund the production of this book, because that was just too much pressure for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it is. I mean, talking about Jake Parker, I think there's, he's the latest book he kickstarted. I think he's still working on, and it's significantly overdue. And I imagine that's very stressful. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Or I would hope and be worried about the fact that it's very stressful. And there's certainly, it is one of these things where it is a pitfall where, sort of, it's like, almost like the iOS store, you know what I mean? It's kind of like the field of broken dreams of people kind of who are like, I've got the best idea for a game, and, put money into it, and then it comes out and then nothing happens. You know what I mean? Certainly Kickstarter does offer that as a possibility where it's like, you can potentially, no one can back you.
Yep.
Or you can do it and then maybe you miscalculate shipping or something like that, and then you kind of owe people money, and or maybe you don't finish the book. You know what I mean? Were you thinking about any of those things, or what? You were fairly careful with it.
I was pretty careful, and I didn't ask for too much.
Yep.
And to be honest, if I didn't run the Kickstarter, I'd just print it out of my own money.
Yep.
But the Kickstarter enabled me to do a good job.
Yep.
Do a bunch of proofs.
Yeah.
But it was also really good motivation to just to get it out there.
Yeah, you needed to do it. And sort of buy the time that you said you would, and
and dedicate the time and say like no more freelance.
Yep.
Because I didn't freelance for like a month, or no, probably 2 months.
Yep.
Because running the Kickstarter was actually a lot more work than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
With that month of running it, I was
is always the case. There's no amount of this is going to be a really stressful month. I can prepare you for how. So what was that like running it?
Scary.
Just briefly, because again, we probably need to move on to other stuff.
Just pretty stressful. Like writing a lot of emails and writing a lot of things. Like, I did have some interest from a it was called Chubster.com. And they're like a style blog for like, plus size men. And they saw my Kickstarter and they were really interested in like featuring it.
Make sure that's how we
and
spell
they
it.
did a little interview. So I thought that was really cool that they were, thought it was a real positive thing to have like plus sized kind of heroes at the forefront of a a story.
What is the domain?
Chopster. Maybe it's .net or .org. It could be.
Is it a magazine?
No, it's like no.
Hopefully it's still around.
Chopster. I forget what it is. Chopster.
Anyway.
Oh no, it's not. It's not even spelt like that. It's spelt in an interesting way too.
Well, that's.
I don't know.
People always think that's such a great idea.
Yeah, it's hard to find.
With like one R.
Or maybe A. Oh, maybe no. I think it is that.
Like that.
Yeah. Anyway, there it is.
Ooh.
Big men style.
See, how did I know?
Big men style, just like that.
Chubster.
Yeah. So
cool.
So
that was unexpected.
That was unexpected, and just like and I actually emailed a lot of like indie comic sites and stuff like that to get some press.
Yep. And I guess like there is like a body positive message to the comic.
Yes.
Where you have people who are plus sized who are still very stylish.
Yep.
And being secret agents and
and that was the contrast. It was like these like plus size people who were like had a style and had a look and were cool.
Yeah, had personality.
Compared to these like body obsessed kind of like freaks who were
not having any fun.
Not having any fun. Didn't have, they got no style.
Stressed, worried.
Yeah.
Doing evil.
Hyper aggressive. Just
yeah.
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 A fun contrast.
So you kind of got a bit of press there, and that was sort of interesting.
That was fun. And then just like making regular updates and updating people on the progress and
there's a lot more writing and replying to people.
So much
than you would sort of think.
Yep. So but it was good. I made my funding in like the first 24 hours, which was great. And then it was. It kind of there hits a point where it just stops. And I was freaking out.
Yeah, well, everyone does. There's what do they call it?
I don't know. But my friend Ari. He'd actually gone through a game Kickstarter, and he's sort of like that's totally normal. But I was like, what am I doing? I'm not doing enough.
Yeah,
But
no, it is a roller coaster of emotions. A Kickstarter campaign, but very exciting. You know what I mean? And I feel it is like. I think it is very much worthwhile doing if you can, just because it is. I feel like you instantly just kind of get a really good perspective on, you know what I mean? Like, oh my god, I'm actually doing this. People are actually going to judge me, and and oh my god, people actually gave me money. And the thing that I found interesting doing a Kickstarter is like, you pre-Kickstarter, you get it's so easy to get sort of focused on. Like campaign and this and that, and you're reading blogs about like how to do it and what's going on, and then the campaign hits and it's for like every single person is just like, this is way more stressful than I thought it would be. This is way more work than it would be, and like I have to quit work and just focus on I have to talk about you go into your Kickstarter bunker and just sort of scream for a month and just panic, and it's like it's if it's something big, you know what I mean, it's fairly stressful. But then the moment the Kickstarter ends, for me it was just this instant realization of like, oh my god, now I have to actually make this thing,
you have to deliver.
or else, you know what I mean, which I think is good. It is actually a good way to get accountability.
Yeah, and it was great sending stuff off. There was a lot of drawings I had to do, like.
Yeah. So as part of the campaign,
there was like original sketches that I did. And I did them in like nib and ink. But it was
sent
great.
Them off to people.
And sending them off to people.
But
once it was done, it was just so great. Like people were emailing me saying they received it, and tagging me on Instagram and Facebook and stuff when they received it, and it was just really nice.
So it was worth it.
That stuff. Oh, absolutely.
And now you have the book.
And now I have it. Now I've got it forever.
It's there.
It's there. It's a real thing.
Yep.
There's something about having a real...
There is something about having it.
Yep.
That is definitely a thing.
Yep.
And I feel like because I've had a few books published, and I feel like you do take it for granted after a few. But there is that thing where it's like, and it's the same with games, where I made those sort of card games, and you have this thing, and it's like it's different me holding this to you holding this. Do you know what I mean? It's like you hold it, and you're like, I made this thing. I made this, and you can flip through it and be like, I remember. I always remember like what I ate for breakfast when I was like inking a certain panel. Do you know what I mean? I have like a very like a rush of like, I remember doing that. I remember drawing that. I remember all the things I thought about when I was drawing that. Yeah, but it is very satisfying to have done that. And I guess probably very confidence inspiring that like you can create anything you want. You know what I mean? Even a second one. Which I hear might be a thing maybe at some point in the future. I'd
love to.
Yeah. I noticed it doesn't have any fan art by Tim McBurney in the back.
Oh yeah.
Because I think he was lazy.
Yeah. I asked him
didn't do any. Yeah, you asked him, and he was not a good friend or a professional.
That's right. I think very busy.
He failed. In fact, cool. Anyway, I mean, it would be cool to keep going. You know, maybe if people have got more questions, post them in the chat. We can perhaps go after them, you know, a little bit more later when we're sort of, you know, doing some other stuff. But you know, we should probably sort of leave it there so we can move on. But yeah, that's awesome to, you know, hear a little bit of the story about, you know, going from idea to sort of finished thing. You know what I mean? And I think there is something, I'd say, as an artist, I feel like so often I feel like we're worried and we're like asking for permission, just in general, for like, I need a job so someone can tell me to draw a thing. You know what I mean? Like it's when you can actually just create anything you want, it's very sort of liberating as an artist, because, you know, you feel like you have that voice and stuff like that.
And it's so easy to do now.
Yeah, it is. Like,
so easy to get it out there.
Yeah. I mean, self-publishing used to be a lot harder than it is. Yeah. So it's really cool that.
And I think seeing Ari, because being in the games industry for so long, seeing what our friend Ari's done, he kickstarted a game with Hollow Knight, and those guys had never worked on a game before. You know, they had no experience making games. Except for, you know, Will has done some games of his own in his spare time, and Ari and they both did some game jams together, but not real official experience. You know.
No.
And then to just make that and say, you don't know us, but here's what we want to make. Here's some, like, Ari's an amazing artist. Here's some awesome artwork. Here's the world we want to make. Here's a little demo we did. That was it. And they got so much. And I think the thing is, it's not just that you get money. It's that you get like a community. And it's not like, I feel like there's a cynical aspect to that, where it's like people are like, you know, so, you know, I've got my like IP and I'm going to kickstart it, so I build a community and build like, you know, a grassroots, you know, base. And it's kind of a lot of that stuff, you know, you hear people talking about business plans and Kickstarters, and it's pretty gross. You know what I mean? People are sort of just like, you know, trying to exploit this thing. But I think, you know, if you're genuinely like an auteur, right, you're like, no, I want to do this. Probably it's a thing, you know, Hollow Knight, where, you know, until they actually got it off the ground, no one's going to pay them to do it. You know what I mean? No one's going to pay you to do that. And if it's like too complicated, right? Like, it's like, why bother? It's good to actually have people who are following it and, you know, care, because you can like bounce ideas off them, you know. And even if you don't want to bounce ideas off them, they'll often be like, hey, change this. So I think this would be a cool idea. Do you know what I mean? It gives you that feeling that like someone, in at least one person or two people, are going to read this thing or play this thing when it's done. Whereas I know when you're working on a project and you don't have any of that, that's very tricky, you know, because you don't have that confidence, you know, and you get to that 80% point where stuff really gets hard. You don't have that sort of. But they were also really great with like having one of their stretch goals was like, you know, like design a character, and so like people would like do like a real scratchy drawing, and Ari would grab their idea and just like run with it. And so they had, you know, they were really involved with the whole community behind it, and I got people really excited, and it came out in March, and it's doing well.
Done really well. So and another friend of ours, like Rowan Frazier, has done all right, a comic called Blockin', which I think I mentioned on this, like on one of the first streams. I was like, he just finished kickstarting it, but So this is another sort of thing. I don't think he has published it yet, but he's sort of.
Oh, he's got yeah.
It's pretty. It's very close to being done. But you know, again, just another story. It's not like, you know, people are, you know, like you guys are saying, give me $1 million. I want to make a comic, or, you know, even give me $100,000. You know, I need this. But it's sort of it allows you to kind of not put yourself massively out of pocket. Do you know what I mean? For printing costs, which is a concern. You know, even if you have the money, it's like not many people have that much money. You know, to just dump into print costs and then wait 6 months to see a return. So yeah, it's really cool. I would recommend it. Definitely consider Kickstarter as a possibility. Some things that I often talk to people about, you know, if you're an artist, because people talk about, you know, getting freelance work and doing small commissions, for instance. Someone mentioned, and we will move on in a second. I am aware that we are running out of time for this segment, but someone was talking about how do you get your first kind of, you know, freelance work. And I found, for instance, when I did, you know, the Hunters of Arkfall sort of board game, I got tons of people like, you know, sending me emails, you know, offering me work. Not all of it great, you know what I mean? But, you know, some of it was kind of, you know, sort of promising. Doing one of these is a really good way to get your name out there, to show that you are a professional and you can do something. And something I always recommend to people, because one of the things that we've talked about this before, but often what happens when you start freelancing is that you get offered little sort of, let's face it, average jobs, right? Where it'll be someone will say, I'll pay you $30 to do my book cover, right? And it's like, well, you know, it's not like they have more money, you know, it's just someone who maybe wants to self-publish a book and they want a book cover or something. You're like, oh, this is great. It's a professional gig, right?
Yep.
I should take it. And it's like, well, or you could work an hour at McDonald's or 2 hours at McDonald's and earn $30 and then go away and work on your own personal project, which is going to be better for your folio, which is going to give you the best experience. I often say to people, like, you know, something you can try is, for instance, just do like a set of tarot cards as an artist. Do you know what I mean? Or do a set of playing cards as an artist. So just, you know, because that's actually very easy to do. To print a set of cards that's super automated. It may seem tricky, but all of those print on demand, you know, sort of like small print run, you know, there's plenty of places on site where you can basically just upload 52 JPEGs and like they'll send you a single pack of cards with the art for that, you know, in the mail, you know, a week later.
Yep.
So, you know, that's something where it's like you don't really even need a story. Do you know what I mean? If you're an artist and you just want to say, hey, you know, what are all the tarot cards? Let me draw, you know, something like that. I often give that as an example for, you know, that's something you could do as a project, like that will show your illustration, and then you can have that sort of physical product. You know, it gives you something to move forward, and then you can kickstart that, and, you know, maybe you only get, you know, a couple of people, but at least it kind of gives you that project, which I think is kind of useful. So don't think you need to, in order to kickstart something or have a project, that it needs to be like, you know, a multi-million-dollar game or, you know, the next best thing. You know, it can just be, you know, how I want to, you know, print a set of prints, you know, or some postcards,
or
what are some other good ones?
Or well, like a sketchbook.
Sketchbook is a good example.
It's so easy to make a sketchbook.
Yep.
You know, it's like a collection of your drawings, or maybe you want to do some drawings in a theme.
Yep.
And I think that's great.
Or people like publish their Inktober sort of sketches or something like that.
A lot of people do that.
And it doesn't have to be big. You know, people might just say, yeah, I'll pay $5 for this, or, you know, like $10 shipped for some, you know, like small sort of print thing. And, you know, if you only get, you know, 20 people, you can just ship them yourself and it's not a big deal.
Yep.
If you get, you know, 100,000 people backing you, there's ways to automate that. So I definitely look into it. It is very complicated running the campaign, but I think it certainly is character building and worthwhile doing.
Yep, definitely.
Anyway,
and I think I got my Clash of Clans or my Clash Royale job from.
Right.
I showed them this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, can you do some comic stuff? And I said, this
here.
All right.
Sure. Yep. And I think, like,
and also when I got my job on Puss in Boots, you know, my director on that immediately backed my Kickstarter.
Right.
And so what I was, you know, and
that
was cool.
Yep. Yeah. I think that the thing is that anyone who, and talking about ideas, anyone who like has been in a creative industry for a while, you know that everyone's got ideas. Everyone's always saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. to see someone actually do a thing, commit to it, produce it, as a creative person or an art director, you kind of know that that person can do things, right? That they're going to meet their deadlines, that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. Because, you know, even doing something really simple, if you're kind of one of those people who's a bit flaky and you're like, maybe I'm going to blow all my deadlines and run away, you know what I mean? You're not going to be able to produce something, you know, like that. So it definitely shows that you can meet deadlines and manage projects, which I would say helps you getting jobs.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, I like to think I have a reputation of pizza guy gets stuff done.
Yep.
You know, and I think I've never not missed a deadline.
Never blown a deadline major. Just
run
away.
No, never happened.
Yeah.
So I think yeah. And I think it's just because I'm honest as well.
Yep.
You know, you know, like if something's up, I'll tell them.
Yep. I'm not going to meet this deadline yet.
Yeah, and that's never happened.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, so that's been.
Yep. And it does seem to be like, you know, when people get it messy with Kickstarters, it's because they're kind of, things start to go wrong and they sort of stop talking to the people who back them, and you know,
that's what you don't want to do.
Ends badly. So it's a good way. I think if you could, like, the skills that go into making a Kickstarter are also things that go into being professional in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyway, we should move on. What we'll do is we'll take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and do a critique session where I think I'll do some drawovers and Pete can tell me what to draw and give me his opinion on what to critique. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Anyway, we'll see you back in 5 minutes. Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to start going through some critiques. We just took a little bit of time to sort of go through all of the images here and make sure we have, some sort of things to say. So that's sort of what we've been doing. Pete hasn't done this before, although Pete has given many critiques. He's a bit of a pro critique giver, famed throughout CDW for being the harshest lecturer that the faculty has.
I just want people to do their work. That's all.
And if
that's
they
the
don't,
only thing I'm harsh about.
If they don't,
yeah, you can do whatever you want. Just you got to give it a go. That's my approach.
Yeah, Yeah. So we've got this image by Peter Cohen, who is just sort of looking for some general sort of thoughts. And I think sort of one of the main things we're sort of we're talking about is just probably we need to work a little bit more on the 1, 2, 3 read, because there's lots of cool stuff happening, right? There's sort of some good structure. The character is working pretty well. But yeah, the main thing that I'm just gonna get this Wacom tablet properly sorted. But I think the main thing that we were sort of thinking about was just making sure it's got like a good 1, 2, 3 read, whereas I think kind of the bit in the middle is sort of doing that, but maybe we could to a certain degree it's a matter of sort of doing more with less, right? Do you know what I mean? Like I think that we could potentially get rid of some of that detail and the image would be sort of stronger, because and the reason I sort of think more about sort of getting rid of detail versus sort of adding detail is there's actually, because a lot of this is sort of there's some photo based stuff going on here, there's already a lot of high frequency detail, right, which is going to be as detailed sort of as it can get. And I think one of the things that the number one takeaway that I kind of like think we can use here is just that when you refine an image, it's not always about adding. Right, it's often you kind of have to take away as well.
Well, it's like editing.
Yes. Yeah.
It was really interesting. When Etan came here for his workshop, Etan's a concept artist at Naughty Dog. When he was giving critiques, even when he was like doing his actual work and showing like the 3D guys, they would ask him like, well, what would this need? He was just painting out detail. It's like that. It looks like that was a big part of his job was just editing things. And so things wouldn't take away from what the player was. It's like meant to be focused
getting
on.
That hierarchy of detail sort of going. So again, like I'm no Etan, but I can have a go. But what I try and do is just sort of see if you can think about from a value standpoint. Right, you can reduce contrast and what people are looking at by sort of moving things more towards the neutral, right? So sort of creating a hierarchy of value, i.e. we want sort of more contrast, perhaps brighter areas, in sort of one area where we're sort of looking, and we want to kind of dull down some of the other stuff, right? And make sure that there's, again, a hierarchy so that our eye sort of, basically knows where to look. So, I'm just going to sort of try again, just sort of pushing some of these areas that are around the periphery sort of back a bit and sort of thinking about, where do we want to focus? And again, sort of, I feel like maybe if we're sort of, looking through this arch, we could sort of just put a little bit more focus on the arch. Probably if Simon was doing this, he'd try and put more of a door somewhere and have an S-shaped path heading somewhere. I feel like, but I don't know how to do that because I'm not Simon.
Well, this is not really my wheelhouse.
No.
But just whenever I think of this, I just think of where's the focus. And it seems to me that there's so much happening, kind of in the foreground. There's so much detail. It's hard to really focus. And I think the focus is going to be where he's looking. But there's a lot of stuff on the outside that's kind of taking away from that.
No, and I think it's sort of it's a lot of this is a matter of sort of choosing, right? You can't look everywhere. You can't sort of have contrast everywhere. Like I always say that is like you can have contrast in everything, but just make sure you also have contrast in contrast, because otherwise you don't have any contrast because everything's contrasty.
Yes. Well, what's the point of having when everything's high contrast, nothing's contrasting.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, so just in general, sort of like pushing some of these sort of elements, so that there's a good sort of 1, 2, 3. The other thing is, again, like make sure that they're, I think a lot of also what we sort of need to is to sort of establish a bit more of like what the light is doing, right? So think about what the lighting scenario is. Is there any light coming on this side, right? Because it feels like there's lots of light back here, right, past this sort of wall, gate, tunnel thing. Now, is that lit in the same way this is, or is this kind of in shadow? So if it's in shadow, you can still do lots of sort of rendering by thinking about, the fact that you're going to have, sort of some cooler reflections from the sky. You know what I mean? In the shadows, you know what I mean? You can sort of render stuff from an ambient sort of, perspective in many ways, and sort of add detail and that sort of thing. But you want to make sure that, for instance, if this is in light, that, there's a difference between the tunnel, which is kind of in shadow, right? And that sort of outside area, right? So that, if there is sort of light over here, that it's actually sort of lit.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what I'd sort of think about is like, what's the focal area? Make sure your sort of 1, 2, 3 read is there, and just make sure you kind of control the detail a little bit more. But probably Simon would be someone who'd have more to say on this in terms of repainting it. So typically when someone gives me like an environment thing, I don't sort of repaint. I'm mostly just like, let me tweak the contrast to kind of just make sure that we're looking at the right thing. So just think about that. Where's the light coming from? You know what I mean? Like, what's happening?
I think from me, as like a storyboard artist as well, what I'd like to see is him looking more story in this. Like, what's he looking at? He's like looking at a vast space outside the wall, but he's not like, I don't know if there was like someone there, the silhouette, and he was reacting to that, or if he was like, maybe he was like a prisoner and he's like, and seeing freedom for the first time in many years, or something, like he just escaped and he was in his prison gear, just something that kind of communicates a story. At the moment, you've got this guy looking casually, very casually, kind of at an open.
And I think that one of the things that, again, Simon would often talk about with this sort of image is that often you don't get a chance to kind of create that much story with that sort of thing. And I think if that's the case, you really need to create a story about, again, the character who's just a standard character sort of journeying through the environment. And I think in that case, there's probably not enough destinations to go to, you know what I mean? Like maybe if there was some sort of, like castle in the background or some sort of, thing back there, you could sort of say like, right, that's what's happening, or if, this arch was kind of, sort of much bigger, right? And there was something sort of obvious.
That he was going towards.
That you're sort of going towards, right? Like from a narrative standpoint, you can kind of create interesting, sort of narrative stuff. But, if there was sort of something, in back there, right? Where it's sort of obvious that like, this is where we sort of need to go, and again, often it is about, maybe some sort of cave or something, or who knows, right? It's just a thing. That's sort of saying like, I'm going here, and also look at this environment and stuff that I can use to tell you what the game should look like. And it's just a matter of that sort of interest is what you need to sort of manifest and create, and it needs to be abstract or literal, like there's two people or something's happening. Cool. So yeah, again, let us know if that critique helped, or if you have other questions. We can sort of come back to some of these questions, not the paint overs, but sort of questions as we go. So this is Kieran's sort of like, we're doing sort of thumbnails for an old weather-worn house of an old farmer and his possessed wife. So, we're sort of, I feel like we maybe want a bit more of like a horror vibe, he was sort of saying. like a horror sort of aesthetic.
Mhm.
And I think one of the main things is, yeah, like maybe these houses, they're at that stage where maybe he's sort of researched what houses look like. Do you know what I mean? Like some of these are sort of, I think they're looking pretty cool, but they're not looking like the hero house. Do you know what I mean? They look like not the heroic house, but like the main house, the interesting house, the house that has the most character. And I think that's why, you know, like depending on how far you want to push it, but you know, it is about sort of making it a little bit unique. Do you know what I mean? So thinking about, you know, creating some interesting sort of 1, 2, 3 sort of shapes and that sort of thing. So, you know, maybe you have more of sort of like an American Gothic style. Where are we? I'm on the wrong one. Don't want to be drawing on his. Let's open up this one. Yeah, so maybe some sort of, you know, some sort of taller roof sort of stuff, you know what I mean? And more kind of ragged shapes, you know, maybe some sort of boards that are kind of, you know, more sort of
plugging
like
holes.
Plugging holes. And there's a bit of that, right? But I think, again, because, you know, to a certain degree, I think like, you know, like Kieran has a fairly sort of cartoony style, or I guess I feel like that's sort of what he's often going for, is you kind of want to sort of push that stuff as much as possible. So I'd say think about the kind of energy and the character and the extent to which you kind of, you know, imbue things with, you know, just sort of oddness or whatever, and see if you can kind of put that in there. And I think he's sort of starting to do that with some of the wood.
Yep.
But it's just a matter of keep pushing that. Do you know what I mean? Like go and think about, you know, the kind of, if someone's possessed, right? Or if there's something sort of creepy, you know, going on, you know, think about just sort of pushing those shapes in everything, right? So that, you know, there's a bit more sort of, again, you know, we've sort of got it, because here, right? Like he's sort of got some of these boards, but think about, you know, if someone was really rushed, you know what I mean? Like how would they put the board on?
Yep.
You know, just like, I'm frantically boarding something up, you know, right? And so there's just a bit more sort of chaos going on. Again, I'm not doing the best job of sort of drawing over, but you know, just the franticness, right? Like the angles, and you know, you can to a certain degree think of how to rationalize those sort of later. You know what I mean? You know, think about maybe there's sort of you know, there's a hole, you know, in the roof or something like that, and you know, maybe they've just sort of patched it with a tarpaulin, or you know, just those are the kind of things that you can think of to make that obviously different to sort of any other house. Give it a little bit more sort of character, right? Like I like the idea of sort of building it onto, you know, you've got the sort of basement sort of thing, right, where it's sort of on a, you know, you've sort of got it on a hill, you know, so maybe we sort of, you know, enter here and, you know, there's a basement here, but you know, you can sort of, you know, there's a reason why often, you know, people design these kind of, people look at iconic sort of architectural sort of shapes and things like that, and you know, you kind of have, you know, something that's sort of built, you know, on a hill, you know, so there's some sort of basement down here, and you know, all of the shapes are kind of jagged and kind of all over the place, right? Is it kind of makes it really obvious what's going on, which depending on the project, you know, often that stuff is required, you know what I mean? Because you don't, that's the only way you can sort of really communicate that stuff. What do you reckon?
It makes it like an icon as well. It's like this like iconic kind of shape that we know.
Yep.
You know exactly what it is. That's that
thing. It's not just any house.
It's not just any house.
Yeah. But yeah, so you know, think about how you can, and again, you know, you want as much of those kind of diagonal, you know, crazy kind of shapes, and the other thing is, again, think about what's around the house, right? The more sort of chaos and you know, bits and pieces and sort of junk, you know, around the place, the better. Often it's, you know, it's really those secondary things that are going to tell you about who lives in the house.
Yeah,
you know,
it's like you've got the shape, and then you're like, okay, let's do like a lived-in pass.
Yeah,
and let's think about how these people live.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like there's chains or something outside, and you know, there's some stuff that's sort of unexplained, right, that you kind of wouldn't see. But yeah, the more you can sort of make it like a little bit odd, the better, especially if you're sort of going for that sort of cartoony sort of vibe, right?
Because a lot of cartoony things, you're surprised how literal they can be, you know, and
they're not subtle.
They're not subtle, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, is this something like, you know, is this something that's like dangerous? Let's put spikes everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, let's make it look like,
you
know,
there's like the sign saying "possessed woman lives here."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like,
you know, like, you know, it's, and I think it's, you know, if, you know, maybe there is some basement, you know what I mean, that, I don't know, I'm assuming maybe the woman lives in the basement or something like that, and you know, there's a sign that says like "keep out" or, you know, something. You can sort of play around with it, and try and have as much fun as you can, although I know that can be hard if people are drawing houses and things. They're not, you know, because I know I think he's more of a character sort of guy. Cool. So this is Catherine's image, which is, I think, is just like a study of, again, that sort of Blade Runner scene. So yeah, I would say like the
Have you seen the new Blade Runner?
I haven't.
It's amazing.
Is it?
It is like
really
legit amazing.
Wow. Is it like
so
amazing
good.
movie or just looks good?
Everything.
Okay.
I was so impressed.
You heard it here first. Or?
That's right. Go and watch it.
Okay.
It's not doing well in the box office, so go and watch it. Because that makes me real sad.
Yeah. Okay.
It's so good.
I'll report back.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, at least it means there's lots of Blade Runner art coming up. Yeah. So I guess the main thing I'd say here is I think you could probably, again, do more with less by losing some edges.
Yep.
Again, doing the smoke with, you know, some sort of brushes that are more smoke-like.
Like a softer
softer
even
brush.
A soft round brush will get you very, very far.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, because I think one of the things is what you need to do is match the opacity and the subtlety of like how much sort of pressure you're putting down with the kind of strokes you can actually create. Yep. And I think that's why often like maybe a round brush with like, you know, 10% opacity will give you a better result. Do you know what I mean? Because you can really kind of make the shapes you want.
Yep.
Whereas here it sort of seems like it's a bit sort of like chaotic.
Yep.
So it just be a matter of sort of, I don't know whose brushes are sort of here. Anyway, there should be some sort of smudgy ones, but just basically lose some of those edges. Is this? I'm drawing on the old one.
Old layer.
Let's get on the right one. So yeah, just lose edges, right? Like don't, like when you're sort of working, one of the things I think that's really important when you're doing studies like this is, I'd say maybe a bit more thinking, right? Like really think about what brush stroke am I going to use? How can I make this as efficient as possible? And I think that way, you know, like mix up the brushes, use some sort of different brushes. I think you were saying, you know, before maybe you could do a bit more sort of, you know, drawing first.
Yeah, I think maybe you went into painting just a little bit too quickly.
Yep.
I think it would have really helped for you to just focus on like lining things up a little bit more.
Yep. And that can be, it doesn't need to, you don't need to be like drawing with a line necessarily, just by like blocking it out,
blocking the
getting the shapes right.
Yep.
Thinking about, you know, the, you know, simple tones, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think like, you know, I think the character is definitely coming through. But I think that a lot of the sort of messiness is not necessarily helping the image. Do you know what I mean?
Because really, you want to focus on her eyes.
Yep.
That's where
you
want to have that focus. And I feel like my eyes keep drifting to the smoke.
Yep.
And the jagged kind of strokes that's going on.
Yep. Yeah, and it doesn't need to be like, you know, let's use a blurry sort of brush. Again, you know, you can use something that's sort of a bit painterly. I don't have all the brushes that I would normally use, but, you know, just think about, you know, losing some of the edges so that we don't have quite so much sort of mess. And if you do have mess, that it's kind of controlled mess, right? It's sort of exactly the type of mess you want. But yeah, a lot of it is just right brush, right time, and also think about where you want the focus, right? We want the focus kind of here. So one of the major ways you can do that is not have any brushiness or messiness, like, you know, around the periphery. Like often I find just kind of going just doing this, where I kind of basically just sort of smudge stuff around the edge of a painting that's like a bit sort of messy brush wise, it just helps so much, right? Because it's immediately going to say, now there's more contrast here, whereas here we've got almost, you know, like sort of, it's almost black on white, right? In terms of the contrast, that sort of level of contrast and that kind of shape isn't really anywhere else. Whereas if I just like, I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing, I'm just kind of like, let's lose edges except for in the face, you know what I mean? So if we just go around and kind of say, lose as many edges as we can that are not this face, I think that it'll start to get that 1, 2, 3 read in there. And I don't know. How much do you think about, you know, sort of 1, 2, 3 read or kind of hierarchy of detail when you're doing drawings?
Me?
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah. So really, I mean, I think I'm even more simple than that, to be honest. I'm like, where is my eye going?
Yeah, it's just like one, like first read.
First read. Yep. I think I'm not even.
You'll leave that to someone else. If you're storyboarding, probably.
Well, and maybe I think where's my eye going, and like I just think about the composition. I think about like, okay, where's my eye going next?
Yep.
And I try and kind of like lead everything into that one focal point.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I think
when
that
I design, I think more about 1, 2, 3,
right,
and like thirds and
yep,
that kind of thing. But yeah,
yep, yeah. So anyway, that's just basically losing edges, and I think what you'll find is like a lot of this, you know, maybe the drawing could be a little bit more sorted on the face, but compositionally, if we just sort of lose a lot of those, then all of a sudden the painting which is there and the strokes which are there come into focus.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a much more useful sort of image, because then you can actually focus on the drawing. Do you know what I mean? And as you make the drawing better, the image will get better. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I feel like one of the real dangers of doing this is that, where is my cursor gone? Oh, it's over here. Yeah, one of the dangers of sort of working on it like this is that you don't really know what's wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like, because and a lot of it I think is just the contrast. It's hard to see if you improve the drawing, for instance, it may not actually improve the painting because your eye is just constantly distracted by other contrast.
Yep.
Yeah. I think this Wacom is being weird.
Oh no! Is it just because it's you can't see the?
It is. It's too small.
It's too small.
Right.
Is it? Is
cool.
that it? Yeah.
Newbie mistake.
I do that all the time.
Well, the thing is, you just when you're on a live thing, you just don't know what could be going up. So let's just try and go through some of these sort of quickly and maybe just give some takeaways.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Because I think it's better to sort of, you know, touch on a lot of these images quickly. So this is Kyle's, and yeah, I think that I think probably the design has like one too many things going on. There's a lot of like, again, there's not, we keep talking about it, do you know what I mean? There's not that hierarchy of like, what's the number one thing I should look at, you know what I mean? And if you look at any Star Wars design, right, or any sort of, you know, like the problem is the Doom Cyber Demon kind of thing is like, it's a lot of sort of Doom aesthetic on a thing.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So
yeah,
like,
I feel like maybe it doesn't meld in with the Star Wars world, if that's what you're trying to do. Like demons don't really exist in Star
yeah,
Wars.
I think it's like, I think when you're doing this, it's like if you have 50-50 Star Wars and like Doom Demon, maybe it's going to be like, it's a bit too much of everything.
Yep.
And I would think maybe sort of say, could you do like, you know, a Star Wars character that has 10% Doom sort of influence, or could you do, you know, a Doom demon that has like 10% Star Wars influence? Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you just kind of put too many things together, it becomes sort of hard to read and hard to say, like, what am I looking at? Yep. One of the things you'll find with a lot of the Star Wars designs is they're all pretty simple, right? It's really, it's there's not much to it. Often there's like an iconic helmet, or an iconic sort of weapon, iconic color. That's it. Yep. You know what I mean? It doesn't get super complicated, and so it's sort of tricky to give it that Star Wars vibe while sort of doing some of these other things. So the other thing I'd say, just with your sort of highlights with the sort of the red, I think that's looking pretty cool. But yeah, probably to make it feel sort of really lit. You're going to need to sort of darken down some of these areas as well. Do you know what I mean? Because it feels like the character's actually decently lit, and then they've got that red on them. Yeah, and it's probably not going to be that bright or visible. Do you know what I mean? Because it's you would really only see that bright kind of like effect of that when someone was in the dark. Yep. Yeah,
it would be much more like subdued.
And, so you would see something. Soft. You would see maybe that this side of the character is a little bit redder. You would get some of that sort of ambient light, but it's not going to be that sort of bright light. And so that's like something that again is quite easy to do, is to sort of say, I want lighting on here. Do you know what I mean? Yep. But you really are only going to see that lighting when you've got, you know what I mean, when you've got that. We okay for chat, Rick? I think this is saying we're like reconnecting to chat, but that's all right as long as it's okay there. Cool. Yeah. So it's just a matter of saying, why is there red light there? Do you know what I mean? You're only going to see that kind of affect of some sort of light source if the other light sources are significantly less. And it's kind of like it's the same thing. If I get a like a phone light or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, or for instance, I've got my phone here. If I put my phone up to my face, there's a light here, but it's not that bright. Whereas if it was all dark, then you'd see kind of real up lighting. Do you know what I mean? And it's just because, no matter how, even if I sort of do it with a flashlight, you know what I mean? It's bright, right? But it's not crazy bright. Whereas if you turn all the lights off, then you're going to get that sort of rim light effect. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So always sort of just think about those things when you're sort of rendering everything up. Cool. So Courtney's image, I think we were both thinking it looks pretty cool. Yep. And I think the real question was sort of as a thumbnail, like, is this too much? Is this not enough detail? What should I focus on? I'd probably say as a thumbnail, I think maybe this is a fine amount of detail. You could probably do less.
I'd probably say less, because you probably want to, if it's a thumbnail, you always want to do like a whole bunch. Yeah.
So you'd be better off doing more thumbnails. At a lower detail.
And focusing on real broad.
And then
broad things.
Take that to, and maybe do this like level. And then sort of say, is this any good? And then, if that does get picked, then you can sort of take it further. And there's also, it's important to understand when you're doing thumbnails that often you're handing thumbnails up to lecturers as part of deliverables for things. But often, as an artist, especially a freelance artist, you may do, a set of 20 thumbnails that you don't show to anyone ever. Right? They're just for you, and so you may do, 20 thumbnails like this, way rougher. And then you'd say, I'm going to pick 5 of them that I think are the best, that are a good variety, and I'm going to render them up maybe to this level, and I'll send those to the art director, because then they're not looking at like pages and pages of sort of like really rough thumbnails. You're sort of doing a bit of like pre-art direction, depending on what scenario you're on, like that. That might be something as well. So
depends who you're working with. Like,
totally.
Is the art director an artist who can read scrappy roughs that you'd be fine sending them to it, or is it more like a client who's not an artist who would freak out if you send him real scrappy roughs?
And a lot of it is I think that the key, like the way I always sort of describe it to people, is that you should be able to sort of you should have a good 5-minute thumbnail, a good half an hour thumbnail, a good half an hour character, a good 3-hour character. You know what I mean? Like, so just figure out how you can sort of execute something in a given time, and then just sort of say how much, does it feel like this person would like 20 rough thumbnails, 5, thumbnails at this stage, or, maybe just a couple of sort of more detailed sort of characters or something like that. And if you've got all those in your repertoire, you can sort of pick and choose. But yeah, I think this is maybe a bit more detailed than I would consider to be a thumbnail, but I think it's a really nice kind of character. It's really well sorted.
Yep. It looks consistent.
Yeah, it looks consistent. I like the visual. We've got good design language. There's that sort of fanciness. You know what I mean? Sort of inlay gilt and stuff like that. Yeah, so I think it's looking cool. I wouldn't worry about it. Certainly not about it having not enough detail.
No.
Right.
So I think it's fine.
But it can take, if you just keep practicing, maybe putting in less detail, it may take a while for you to really get like a good flow. You know what I mean? It takes you a while to kind of be like, this is the best I can do in 2 minutes, 5 minutes. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a separate thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know.
What do you think, Pete?
Oh, I don't know. I just don't think it's too. It's not. I don't think you should be too concerned about. I need to get this done super duper quick.
Sure.
I feel like just doing the best you can do. And just focusing on the quality of your work is the most important thing.
No, I don't think you need to be rushing. I just think you need to sort of see it's not about like one level of detail is right or wrong. It's just like you need to be able to say, this feels like this project is going to respond better to more detailed, less thumbnails. You know what I mean? Whereas this one, maybe I just need to do a whole bunch of really rough things, And the reason I say practice is because if you kind of say in your head, like the first one you work on, if you send someone like, one of these and then you say, right, I'll do another 20 of those today, you might be in trouble. You know what I mean? So it's good to know this is sort of how long it sort of takes me to do this. That means I'll be able to get X number of, of these done in that day. If you're 1 or 2 above or below, doesn't really matter, but you kind of have a ballpark. So then I feel like if you're just sort of slacking. I only did one thumbnail sketch. Is that enough? No. Yeah, so that's more what I mean. But yeah, that is probably true. Yeah, don't stress about timing or too much. Cool. Anyway, I think it looks good. So this was Tom's, and this is sort of a character. This is looking pretty cool. I think like the rendering's looking really nice. The pose is looking pretty cool. It's got some complicated stuff going on with the pose that's working. Did you have any thoughts?
I just noticed that her shoulder is looking quite massive. The shoulder that's kind
of
up.
One?
Yeah, it's looking very bulbous.
Yep.
And I can't stop looking at it now. I've noticed it.
Maybe it's because it's red and bulbous.
Maybe. So maybe that's a thing. I feel like you're trying to do that contrapposto thing, which is nice, where the hip is like, on an angle, but it's maybe you could push that a bit further. That would be nicer. Like it feels like I feel like her whole upper torso should be twisted, and it feels like it's just her.
Yeah, so it should be like, for instance, like it feels like sort of
the
breasts, the boobs are kind of like flat, or that they're going this way.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Almost.
And
right.
Then her shoulder is like up.
Yeah. So it should be that sort of like this is kind of going this way.
Yep.
Right. And essentially.
And the ribs and the torso are going
the opposite way. This is sort
of
going this way. So if anything, this needs to kind of be a bit more like sort of this.
Yep.
And that's one of the things I often sort of talk about in class is that frequently, and so that would mean again that sort of the breasts are going to be
like on an angle
more on an angle like this, because really where it's twisting is the spine, right? Like it's not like once we get to the rib cage, like the rib cage is not twisting about. Do you know what I mean? So the rib cage is kind of staying here,
like that,
right? That's going there, and what's changing is kind of that spine, right? It's either going dang or whatever direction. So again, it feels maybe that shoulder is a little bit chunky, or maybe just a bit sort of bulbous, to use Pete's term.
Yes. Bulbous.
Good word. And I think one of the things that happens is now maybe it feels like the neck and the head could move a little bit this way, right?
Yes.
So if we think about center line's hitting there. I feel like the neck and the head, right, could kind of move a little bit over this way.
Yep.
Which would just be a cut and paste job.
And then again, it'd be nice for that to have like a nice angle as well.
Yep.
You know, like I don't know. I think it might be a nice little up angle, like a.
Yep. Well, that's the question. Is like, do you dare try and draw a head from below? That may be part of it. But yeah. Anyway, I mean, Tom probably could take what we're doing and sort of move forward with it. I think his drawing's getting pretty good. But I think part of it is to kind of is also. Yeah, it's kind of about sort of balancing and then also making that the head kind of to a certain degree can also be contrapposto, right, to the thing. So I think, certainly if like you kind of her body's sort of facing this way, I think it is good for the head to face this way. I feel like you could maybe have the head facing a little bit more front on, maybe, because it does feel like her head is twisted quite a bit, which maybe has a bit of an unnatural kind of like really posed look. But anyway, so think about.
Then you could have her eyes looking that way.
Yep.
So
no, that's true.
It has that same feel.
Yep.
Even if you do adjust the face.
Yep.
Which would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's looking good, but I feel like it's like pop that shoulder out, because often when you look at above from a torso, right, we sort of think, maybe I've got shoulders here, so I've got a head here, I'm looking this way, right? We often feel like, I've got shoulders kind of here, but actually your shoulders kind of curve in a little bit, right? So often the shoulder, right, like, on sort of men, right, the shoulders are actually a bit forward from the clavicle, right? There's kind of that indentation sort of around here. So just make sure that this shoulder's kind of coming forward, just a little bit, because you can sort of have it back, but it's a little bit uncomfortable, right, to kind of really pull that shoulder back,
especially in like kind of a standing.
She's
like casually.
Casual
badass.
Yep. Anyway, so that's looking cool, and again, remember that the elbows are going to follow the torso contrapposto.
Yep.
So I feel like it could be that elbow is a little bit high there, which doesn't matter. I think you can still have the hand in the same position, but just watch that stuff. But it's looking pretty cool. All right, let's see if we can just maybe give a couple of like sort of small feedback things to the last few people, and maybe we can revisit these at a later date. But cool. So we were trying to figure out which Waterhouse sort of painting this is meant to kind of be sort of inspired by. But I think one of the major things happening in all sort of Waterhouse images is just if you sort of take, like a Waterhouse image, and sort of turn it into grayscale, you're going to see a lot of contrast, right? Right, so again, we're not sure whether it's this one. This one was listed, but I feel like because there's sort of water, it could be a little bit more based on this. But again, this has the sort of fog. One of the things that's really important to just pay attention to is just value range, right? And if we sort of look at this and we sort of go into grayscale mode, you can see that the character is sort of blending a little bit. It's the pouring water one, So again, like if we take that,
she's like light on black.
And so it's really important to sort of like look at that stuff. There we go.
And look at how just behind her head is just so dark. And
So if we sort of copy this, right? Let's take it into Photoshop and then just look at the. We can just kind of paste it in here, I think. Right? Just look at the value sort of arrangement, right? So we kind of have, her hair is dark, but what's behind it is darker. Then we've got the kind of the bright white skin that's sort of contrasted behind, against everything. And the image is, essentially, the brightest part is, you know, her sort of skin.
Yep.
Even like her feet, do you know what I mean, are kind of like toned down. Yep. So we kind of really just look here. And the water itself isn't actually as dark. So it's important when you're kind of planning.
It's interesting that kind of, you know, we talk about 1, 2, 3 read.
Yep.
It's like you look at that shoulder, then you look at the water, and then you look at her eyes. Yep. It's like that. There's like a triangle there.
Yeah, and it's almost really like, you're not meant to look at her face, right? It is the shoulder which kind of draws you up there, and then you look at the intensity of the face, right? It's kind of like hidden intensity. I mean, these things don't happen by accident. You know what I mean? These things are often planned. These paintings take, you know, months to create, you know, weeks to plan. You know, they're not the sort of thing where someone's just sort of being like, I'll do a speed painting.
No, it's very deliberate.
It's like, I'll do a 3-month marathon painting. So think about that, right? Think about like what your 1, 2, 3 read is going to be. I think there's heaps of cool effects, there's heaps of cool painting, but even if you wanted to keep all of this stuff and maybe say I'm going to have a hidden character with just these abstract water shapes, you kind of want to break the water shapes down and make sure like one is going to draw your eye more than the other. So that's the main thing. Without doing some paint overs, unfortunately we don't have time to kind of do heaps of that now. But just think about 1, 2, 3 read, right? Like, and actually break down those paintings that you're inspired by on a value basis, right? And a color basis, right? And say like, what's the 1, 2, 3 read, right? We keep saying it. I keep like, it's a broken record. But
that's what,
you know, like it's a huge part of it, you know? Yeah.
Sure is.
So that's what we'd sort of say just as a quick takeaway. Again, just as a quick takeaway from this is looking pretty cool. And I would say, do you know what I mean? I really like the water effects here. Do you know what I mean? I think they've done a really good job, you know, like painting it. There's obviously a lot of attention paid. So it's not to say, oh, it's not working. Just like number one thing to think about is like 1, 2, 3 read. That'll help you get the benefit from all the rendering you're doing. Again, here we've got George Martin. And we've got sort of a ZBrush sort of image that's been taken into Keyshot and tuned in Photoshop and stuff. The number one thing I'd sort of say is, what we kind of let's get the is I think that again you could probably we sort of have like again a very strong kind of shape is again like focus the image a little bit. I think you could probably tweak the background so that we could actually read the form of the character. One of the primary things we're doing when we are doing creature design or any sort of design is you want to show the form, right? So when you look at a lot of, you know, these people who are doing, you know, ZBrush concept art, often what their render is doing is like showing form, right? You've got sort of 3-point lighting. It's sort of really designed to kind of
show off the design,
show off the actual design, right? The form, which is not, you know, the lighting or the composition, right? It's just like, what does this thing look like, right? So I think maybe a bit more like that, whereas I feel like some of this is maybe overpowering the actual modeling that's been done. So again, tweak, think about how you're presenting the design. The design looks pretty cool. There's some good stuff going there. Yeah, but that's the number one thing I'd sort of say there. And again, let us know if you want us to go into a bit more detail. We can maybe unpack something. If something isn't clear or we haven't really covered your thing, we can go over it. When Pete does his sort of demo, I can sort of delve into that a little bit more. So last we've got Rachel, and I thought, you know, you were sort of talking about, you know, like whether or not it's a 2D or 3D animated cartoon, because again, Pete does a lot of this stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like you've sort of designed characters for animation, so you're sort of thinking a real world.
Well, you know, I was thinking about how, like, if I was going to animate this in 2D,
it might be hard.
It might be hard, maybe.
Yep.
You know, just because there's so many things going on, you know, so I'm not quite sure. I mean, that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. He's thinking that would be hard to animate in 2D.
I mean, it could be 3D, and that's fine. But yeah.
Yep. But a lot of it was talking about how to present it. Like if you had to present a design like as a finished design, say it was 3D or something like, or maybe this was just a first pass. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't necessarily a production concept art, but maybe just sort of inspiration. How would you sort of present it the best way possible? Like in the past, how have you presented character designs?
Yeah, well, I think if I like presenting it in context as much as possible. So I mean, this is kind of maybe not relevant to this, but having a character in a world, or in like the level, is super duper important.
So apparently the in-game is in pixel art.
Pixel art, yeah. So it'd be great to like you've done these designs and then have a little pixel art, like an in-game version of what this looks like, and think, does this read? Or do you know what you could do is you could use a mosaic filter. Select this.
And just see what
and just do that slider and pixelate it and go, oh, how does this look? Or
and that might be a quick way to sort of prototype. You know, like what does it look like? You know, what I mean?
It'd be great. And once you've pixelated it like that, you'd be like, oh wow. So, you know, maybe like her head should be bigger and she should have these big glasses because you want them to read. And then, I think that could be really cool because I think that as just general designs, I think they're really, really cool.
Yeah, they are. I think they're looking good. There's like good appeal. I think the colors are nice. Interesting shapes. You know what I mean? It's clear what they are. Yeah, so they're looking really good. And I think it is just a matter of sort of how do you present them. I think the way you presented them is pretty good. Maybe a bit. I feel like they could do with some more breathing room. I don't know whether that's just the way it's been cropped sort of here. If you're just talking about like how do I present them. But yeah, like, you know, think about, you know, putting the character's name maybe on the sheet. You know what I mean? Like, I like that a lot of the information here, you know, has a bit more of a handcrafted sort of, you know, like feel. But that's do some things like, you know, put the pixelated, not just the colors, but, you know, what might this look like if it was done in pixel art? And, you know, maybe, you know, this is this character, you know what I mean? Maybe write some of their traits on the board or something like that. Because that stuff can help to kind of just be like, this is sort of what I'm looking at. It's a nice sheet, you know what I mean? It's sort of nicely designed. And again, like you could sort of just present one character big and then have a smaller sort of version of the lineup and, you know, maybe some of the pixel art stuff next to it, you know what I mean? That sort of stuff. If you're sort of wondering, you know, how do I actually present, you know what I mean? Like from
I always like it. I think clients love seeing things in context. Anytime you can do that, just do it. You know, because it really like us. Oh, whoa.
Or just like, extra stuff that helps contextualize it. You know what I mean? If you can't draw it in a scene, you know, if you don't have time to do that, if you can, you know, she's got the book, you know what I mean? Something where you can give them a prop or, you know, something like that. Whereas just those character lineups are really useful, but it's more of a production tool to a certain degree. To have like, here's a lineup of all the characters, this is how big they are. It's like something that's useful, but if you're actually trying to present it to a client or something like to a sort of, you know, more of an end client, if you can sort of show stuff that's really easily identifiable, like sort of in context.
I'm just thinking about production, that's all. But again, it all depends on who you show it to. Like, it's not. I wish it was an easy answer, but it's like, is it for like a pitch and you're just like, you know, showing it to some, I don't know, investor guy who's not really an artist, and you just like want to show off the characters and say like.
Then it's almost like you need it in context. You need it as rendered as possible.
But I think this is fine. But in terms of like the art team, who are going to make this into pixel art. They might need a little bit more. Like, what will this actually look like in the game? I mean, that's.
Cool. But no, I think they're looking good.
It's looking nuts.
I'm like, awesome. if you could like make that into a game, I think that would be good somehow. I don't know how.
Awesome.
It would be good. Awesome. We had some really cool submissions this week. Hopefully, we've given some advice that is helpful in some way, shape, or form. What we'll do is we'll take a 5-minute break so Pete can set up Photoshop to his liking, and then he will do a demo. And I'll kind of, you know, chat to you guys in the chat. If you've got any questions about what Pete's doing or other things we can sort of go over, we can go over that. But we'll come back in 5 minutes and keep going. welcome back, guys. All right, we've got a couple more seconds to go while Pete messes with the keys on this keyboard and ruins it for anyone else.
Yes.
Because I think one of the interesting note is that Pete often doesn't use a Wacom tablet. He often uses a Cintiq tablet.
Yep.
So I think you were saying you get used to using, like, is it A and S as brush?
Oh, that's
bigger and smaller.
That's how I've always been.
Yeah,
just because I like to keep everything on one side of the keyboard.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what he was changing. So we're going to do or Pete is going to do a demo. I'm going to talk incessantly about random things, some of which hopefully are about what Pete's doing.
So
so tell us about what you got planned.
So basically, I just want to do some poses.
Yep.
I mean, I've only got 40 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
so I just want to just show you my approach of kind of gesture drawing and how I just kind of go for it. I don't mind being sloppy at this stage. The main purpose is just like energy and just communicating what I want to communicate in the pose.
Yep.
You know.
So this is kind of the same sort of thinking you do when you are doing storyboarding, or
yep, everything.
So just drawing,
storyboarding, even when I'm doing my like design work.
Yep.
It's literally
just hacking away.
Just hacking away at it, yeah, and using Photoshop's tools like transform just to mush things around if I feel like they're not, you know.
Yep. So yeah, let us know if you've got any questions in the chat about, you know, again, if there's some stuff we were talking about earlier that you'd like clarification on, or just some extra information on, or something like that, some stuff you weren't clear on, just, you know, let us know in the chat. I can sort of, you know, talk about some of those things, or, you know, about what Pete's doing, you know what I mean, or maybe some information about storyboarding. We were sort of talking about freelancing and that sort of thing. So, you know, maybe we could go a little bit more into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, but do you feel that sort of drawing this way, where it's like almost like, you know, you were saying you don't care if you're sort of sloppy. Do you know what I mean? Do you think that's sort of important?
Oh yeah.
Where it's like you're sort of giving yourself, it's not just permission, but you're almost saying like, I'm gonna draw messy.
Well, it's not messy, but it's just going for it. Like I feel like, and drawing with like purpose.
Yep.
You know, or you know. And just keeping that energy, you know, that's really important. And if I don't have energy in the first stage, in this stage, I've got nowhere to go.
Yep.
You know, so that's what I want. This is actually my demo from when I teach character class, because I think it's just important just to see the process, and I'll see.
Yep.
Maybe I'll come with like three poses, and I'll just refine.
Yep, refine one of them.
Yeah.
Yep, cool. Yep. And so what are you sort of thinking about now in terms of just...
Gee, I'm pretty much putting lines on and just
seeing what happens.
Just searching for like...
Yep.
You know, pose, thinking about weight.
Yep.
You know, thinking about like gesture. Yeah. You know, thinking about these long lines like through the pose and how that works.
Yep.
Just thinking really broad. And I think that's really important when you're... You know.
Yeah. Well, it's important when you've got to do a lot of drawings in a day.
Yeah.
Especially.
Yes. And really with storyboarding, you're not focused on details. You're focused on like the feeling of the pose. And communicating the story.
Yep.
You know, is he... I don't know. Is he scared? Or like what?
Yep. Totally.
Is he angry? You know.
Yeah.
What is he?
Yeah,
and it's not about fussing over things. It's just
Yep.
In fact, storyboarding is easier because I usually have a very clear direction of what I want to do.
Yep.
You know, because it's told to me in the script.
Yep.
You know, so this is a bit harder because I'm just like playing. And I'm like, what's good? I'm like, I don't know.
Until something's like, I'm the best drawing. Draw me.
Yeah, just like, I don't know. Just like thinking about, like, I'm just thinking about him like hulking out a bit. Like, maybe he's doing a big scream. You know?
Yep. So it's like, I guess a lot of people, you know, might ask or think about, you know, is it sort of daunting, having to draw so much? Is it something you sort of get like sort of sick of, or do you know what I mean? Like a lot of people are like, is it hard drawing so much, basically?
Yep.
Yep.
Well, yes and no. Sometimes I like if I think about how many drawings there needs to be in an episode, freaks me out. So I try not to think about it.
Yep.
I just try and that's the way I approach boarding is I just jump in.
Yep.
Jump in, think about staging, think about communicating the story. Again, like thinking broad and then trying to go more specific.
Yep.
So just trying to get the guts of it and get the camera working, get the staging working, telling the story, and then after that, then I can like focus in on tighter details and that kind of thing. I think that helps me a lot because I can get through a lot of the script, and I just I kind of work pretty frantically to get to that stage, and then I can feel like I can relax a bit more.
Right, because the bones are in there.
Because the bones are in there.
Yep.
Yeah, and that makes it a lot less daunting.
Yep.
And it's usually when I finish the episode, I'm like, how did I do that?
Yep.
Like every episode.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I'm like, I can't believe I just drew that many drawings. What? How did? I don't know.
So was it hard doing it for the first time?
Well,
like boarding an actual sort of TV show.
Yes. The first show I worked on was Puss in Boots, and it had a lot of it was a really intense show.
Yeah.
Like even I actually know people who I studied with who worked on it and said it was just crazy.
Right.
And then the examples of boards they showed me were like ridiculous, like fully animated.
Yep.
Feature style boards, but it was for a TV show. If you can
Yep.
imagine that. And it was really high quality and it was that was daunting. And then my boss was this exceptional board artist, and I had to kind of take over from him, and I was by myself.
Right.
So that was pretty.
Not stressful at all. Just easy.
So that was pretty intimidating, but it was a really fun show.
Yep. Yeah. So do you think like your art has gotten better after doing like boarding? Do you know what I mean?
I think so.
Yep.
I think so. I feel like it's helped, like with this comic stuff. When I do roughs, I can just do them in a very like clear, simple way, and I can just get sign off very quickly.
Yep.
I think that's really cool.
Yep.
I don't actually know what I'm doing here.
No.
I should
pick one. Which one do we want? Chat room. Number 1 or number 2 or number 3. Pete doesn't have to listen to you, but
no one's talking.
No one minds.
Well, I think the running one's like simple and cute.
This one. Yep.
Yeah. Look at that. I got 30 minutes.
Yep.
I think I could probably do something with that.
Yep. Draw some muscles.
Draw some muscles on it. 3. I could, although I don't like the way he's like standing.
Well, there's a bit of a weird tangent on 3 with the arm and the leg as well.
Yeah, I'll have to give it a bit of love.
Someone says 1.
Let's do 1. I do 1. I want to do.
Pete
1.
wants to do 1.
There you go. It'll make this thing go.
Yep.
Much better.
Yeah, we don't want to be too challenging, or Pete won't come back. So we're like, screw that.
Like,
had to go in and
don't treat me good.
draw the one I didn't want to draw.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think 1 is a good example of like a really foreshortened sort of drawing that I feel like like when you draw that, when Pete draws that, it looks to me like kind of quite like you made it look easy, but that's a fairly complicated pose to do. You've got a lot of sort of basic sort of movement theory in there.
Yep.
That's important. There's a lot of foreshortening.
Yep.
One fist needs to be bigger than the other.
Yep.
Etc. Yeah, so it's actually a fairly sort of tricky pose.
I can push that, if I want to. That's kind of what I can do now. I can say, do I want this like really like in front?
Yep.
And this one really behind?
Yep.
Like a weird focal length.
Yep. Yeah, like really pushing that
wide
angle.
Yep.
Yep.
I feel like he needs a gut more.
He needs more bulk.
He needs more
because you in the thumbnails he's a bit leaner than he is in the 3D right. sort of model version.
He needs to be.
Yeah. So like again, you're still sort of hacking away at it. I guess is that sort of what you're.
I think so.
Like you're doing like this isn't necessarily the final line drawing.
No, not the final line drawing yet. So I'm still like, what I'm thinking about now is, now that I've got the energy here, I'm thinking more about, like construction, but I'm still being loose.
Yep.
So now I'm thinking, I'm putting center lines in there. I'm thinking about.
Yep.
I might think about muscles. I'm still happy to like just delete big parts of it.
Yep.
Again, I feel like. I can just. Do I need to show this foot? Not. I think I won't show it.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe
So I think it's like I feel like it's like is this something they teach you in animation school to kind of like keep drawing like iteratively? Because I feel like that is something that people who kind of work in animation a lot sort of do this thing where you kind of do one really rough drawing, another less rough drawing, another less rough drawing, and then eventually you kind of get to the end, which I feel is a very useful way to work.
Yep.
Because I feel like it does give you that feeling that like it's okay if this is a bit sketchy. You know what I mean? You can jump in.
Maybe just like helps me not not freak out.
Yep.
And not get scared of just like trying. When I know the line quality doesn't have to be perfect, I kind of freeze up. I think everyone kind of freezes up.
Yep.
When they have to do clean lines, so it's just like, just think about the energy. That's the most important thing, and it should be the most important thing.
Yep. You can zoom up as well a bit more if you want. That might help people sort of see it.
Yep. Presses. Where's my navigator? I'm really weird with Photoshop because I use the navigator to zoom in. I don't use the zoom buttons.
It's window
navigator.
Where is it?
There.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I'm a weirdo.
Yeah, it's really weird because at CDW we have many computers, and for some reason they seem to get shuffled around like a deck of cards. So but at the very least, like different sort of teachers will constantly be using different computers, and then another teacher will come in and have to do a demo on that computer. It's really interesting to see. There really is no standard way to use Photoshop. People do all sorts of things, you know what I mean? Well, yeah. And they all sort of find ways to make it work.
It's like it's like drawing. There is no perfect way, and you've got to find your own way of doing things.
Yep.
And usually your way is like a mismatch, like a collection of stuff that you've learned from other people. Like the way I draw is probably like just a amalgamation of like stuff I was taught in school, stuff I was taught by people I worked with, stuff I picked up along the way by myself.
Yep.
It's all just. But it's we're all very unique like that. It's really quite funny. Yep. Actually, Puss in Boots was interesting because it was a 3D show. We didn't have to really stick to the model,
right?
Really like super close.
Yep.
We just had to keep the proportions, correct, and his height correct.
Yep.
And so everyone had their own way of drawing it. And it was really cool. I love looking at the other boards. They were really cool.
Yep.
Should have a big mouth.
Big mouth.
Trying to, but I'm trying to like. He doesn't have a neck. Well, he kind of does. Like, what's
this? Is that thing where like you've forgotten how to draw your own character a bit?
Oh, the thing is, he changes every time I draw.
He changes. Yeah. Changes.
Right. Which is kind of fun.
Yeah, because you haven't ever drawn a book with Jim, but you did, and I think
storyboard. But
but you did some extensive storyboards.
Yeah, but it wasn't really.
You didn't do a Kickstarter, and you were like, "Pay me money to do this board," and so you weren't. You were just kind of like, "This is fun."
Yeah, and I wasn't really thinking about his design too much.
Yep.
Maybe he could just be like that. It's kind of cool. He looks determined.
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
And we could probably turn that off now.
Right. So you sort of got to the next stage. It's like more detail.
Probably.
Yeah. So talking about freelance work, because that was a question that sort of came up, and I guess it's people are always sort of we're always sort of talking about this, but I think I don't know whether we've sort of addressed this stuff directly, and maybe not. Your thoughts?
I always say I'm the worst person to ask about freelance.
Yeah, that's what I always say as well.
Just because when I started freelance, I worked in studios like for a number of years. I didn't just freelance right off the bat.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know when people just want to dive straight into freelance, I'm like I don't really know.
Yeah,
how to do that.
No, I think that is fairly tricky. But yeah, because I mean, even I worked at a studio for a very short period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, I would say what I normally talk about, because we were sort of saying like, you know, from commissions to sort of working in a studio, and I'd sort of say, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to sort of start at commissions. Commissions is not really where it starts. And my sort of advice to people, which is, I don't know whether it's fairly sort of divisive perhaps, but my sort of advice is don't do commissions unless you really need the money or something like that, unless that amount of money for that amount of time is really going to be meaningful for you. I think you're much better off kind of just building your folio and work towards getting that job, or getting jobs that actually are going to pay you like a decent amount, because and the reason is very simple. It's just that when you're working on small commissions for people, often they don't know what they're doing, and you actually just get practice working with art directors, you know what I mean, i.e. just sort of, you know, people who aren't very experienced art directors. And I find often people get very frustrated. They often spend a lot of time doing, you know, these commissions for not actually much money, and then often, you know, you can't put that commission in your folio. You know what I mean? It's not always, depending on what it is, but, you know, sometimes these commissions are like, you know, cheap freelance work or something like that. So I often say to people, like, find some project or some way for you to work on your folio, because that way you can sort of show the work immediately. You can get feedback on it. You're not sort of, and you're actually doing exactly the kind of work you want. And keep putting that stuff in your folio, and keep trying to get, you know, sort of whatever job you're actually sort of interested in as a entry-level job.
Yeah. I mean, if you enjoy commissions, then that's fine too. And, you know,
sure.
You could do that. But if you're doing commissions just for the sake of, like, I want the money.
Well, I think often it's like, because I want to be a professional. And because if I'm getting paid,
that means I'm a professional.
That means I'm a professional.
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually, a friend of mine got a commission done. It was really good. It was beautiful stuff, and I'm like, it looked like a lot of work too.
Yep.
I'm like, I don't know, they spent like $50 on it.
Yep.
I'm like, Jesus, that's I would want someone to be paid more than that to do that amount of work.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, and again, that's sort of talking about, you know, like a lot of like commission culture sort of maybe stems from sort of those comic book conventions where people are, you know, getting paid, you know, a certain amount for a head sketch and stuff like that. But I think, yeah, it's important to understand that comic book artists don't get paid that well as a general rule, which is extremely tragic. And that's maybe, you know, you were sort of talking about that earlier on, is sort of, you really wanted to draw comics, but a lot of the time that sort of commission culture is it's sort of it's a little bit, one of the problems I find with it is it's linked to people who sort of don't really value art in the same way that, you know, you would if you're a sort of a professional artist. So you're more likely to run into people who are like, can you do me a commission for free or for $10 or something? And I think as an artist, you know, if you're at a convention and you're a professional comic book artist and you can do a really good head sketch in like 5 minutes, you know what I mean? And a fan is like, cool, I know exactly what I'm going to get.
Yep.
I think that's very different. But I think often if you're doing commissions on the internet, people will be like, yeah, can you do this commission? You know, I need this thing for like, I need a sketch for like $5. And you're like, okay. And actually they mean, I want you to, you know,
a fully rendered
sort of thing. It's just, that's what I feel like it can be sort of dangerous. And I feel like there's a real risk that can sap your energy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'd say,
I think, wear you out and become really kind of hostile towards like clients and people you want to work with, and
yeah,
it's just not good.
Yeah, I think that's a genuine danger, I'd say, is that if you are working for random people on the internet who are just, even they may be very well meaning, but they're not professional art directors. And so they're not experienced at giving feedback, at articulating, visual criteria and things into words. And you can get really frustrated.
And they probably don't know how much work it is. That's a big part. They're not being like malicious about it. They just don't really realize that how much work goes into it.
And how frustrating it is to change things. You know what I mean? I think, especially when you're not getting paid extra, like a lot of the art direction process, and the reason we do so many thumbnails and sketches, as professional artists, is to kind of minimize the amount of changes we have to do. So you can kind of iteratively, let someone be involved in the creative process. Whereas I think a lot of people, again, like sort of amateur art directors, they kind of tend to be like, that's not really looking how I want, but I won't say anything, right? And then it's still not looking how they want, and they're like, I won't say anything. And then you kind of finish it, and you're like, here it is, and they say, yeah, no, I that's not what I wanted. Whereas, art directors are very good at sort of reading sketches, understanding what to do, and saying, oh, no. When you get a really good art director, it's amazing. You know what I mean? Like they're often very good at communicating what they want.
I actually had a question during my workshop, and they were like, what's your best kind of, like working scenario? And I just said, and it's true, like just pretty much having an art director who's an artist themselves. Who really knows what they're doing.
Yep.
And that's pretty much it.
Yep.
Because they're just so great to work with, because if there's some like real small thing that needs to be changed, they won't hassle me with it. They'll probably just do it themselves.
Yep.
They, and they'll know what they want. They can understand rough drawings. I actually did work with an art director who, professional art director, and he, by his own admission, couldn't draw or couldn't sculpt or do art things.
Right.
And he was fine. But he did and I didn't have too much trouble with him, but I knew some of the modelers had a lot of issues where he would be, commenting on little details when overall things weren't really right.
Yep.
And it was quite frustrating, and it was a big, they were just going back and forth for no reason.
Yep.
And then my experience working with Terry at Blue Tongue was just amazing, because I was like, oh my god, this guy he is the fourth concept artist. He is the guy who set the tone for this whole game and this whole style, this world, and he knows everything on a very deep, intimate level, and he's probably the best artist on our team, and he happens to be our director.
And if you can't draw it, he'll just draw it in 5 minutes or whatever.
And that was my first job. He gave me this poster that he did, and he was like, can you make this painterly? And I'm not a painterly kind of guy, and what he did was just amazing. And I went, yes. And so I spent 2 hours mushing this thing, making it worse. And then he said, just give it to me. And he spent 15 minutes at lunchtime. And he made it awesome. And I'm like, whew, bad first job. I'm like, please don't fire me.
Please.
But he was amazing. And he just knew what he wanted.
Yep.
He just knew there was no messing about with him.
Really
cool. Yeah.
Yep. How's this guy going?
He's going all right. He's I could go over and clean him up even more, but I'm like, do I need to do that? Maybe I can try the pooing one for the last 10 minutes.
Okay, do it.
Maybe try and make that pose better. I know I don't like it, and maybe I can make that better. And
cool.
Talk about how I'd make that better.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's I think it tells things. I could clean it up, but then you're just watching me refine little muscles and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Might not be the most interesting thing.
Yep. Well, that again, that's often one of the things that's tricky doing demos, is you kind of spend, very little sort of getting it 80% of the way there, and then, you spend the next 5 hours kind of fiddling with the rest.
Yep. Yes, I don't like this pose. What can I do? I think he needs to be hunched over more.
Yep. or more torso twist.
Yeah,
so he's
or
like contrapposto.
Hey, maybe that could be cool.
Look at here's some bad art direction incoming. Tim's like, do this, do that.
Give it more.
That's what we joke.
Expressions.
Give it more expression. I think he's kind of hunched over like this, and we need him to kind of be like this.
To be more like a.
Yeah, Pete. I feel like he's too this.
Yes, he's too.
And you need to make it like this.
Yes, I like.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I know those.
Pete, because I don't see you doing what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Because you're doing like this.
Yep.
And I meant like this.
Yes, I get.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep. More pizzazz.
Yeah. More like that color. You know, it's not blue.
It's like
it's not green.
It's my favorite.
It's kind of in between green and red, actually. You know what I mean? Kind of like blue, but you know, kind of like red as well. Do you know that color? I mean, just make it that color.
Yes. Thank you, art director Tim. You are so helpful. You're the dream. Maybe he could be like. Could he be like turning his head?
Yeah. So he's like triple contra.
So he's like, yeah, and he's like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think like it really seems like one of the really enjoyable things about drawing in an animated style or drawing in like a comic book style where you can draw quick, you can have lots of fun with drawings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In a way that's maybe not possible if you're sort of trying to create photorealistic sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it depends on your personality really, because some
people find totally. It's not
that stuff really fun, but like I find that dull as hell. Like
no, well, that's it's not about right or wrong. It's just about sort of like, you know, I feel like like, you know, often people do have a sense of humor. You know what I mean? And it can be hard to really get that sense of humor into your job or into your work if you're working in the wrong sort of, you know, place or industry or whatever. Whereas some, you know, you can see like, you know, well, it does seem like animation lets you do some of that.
Well, animation is probably, I wonder if it's like mostly comedy, you know, you're dealing with. So
sure,
it's kind of got to be funny.
Yeah,
and I like drawing funny.
Yeah,
I do laugh at my own drawings.
I would be the worst person to do this. I don't have any jokes like this. Oh yeah, cool. Yep.
Yeah, just trying to maybe offset in animation we call it twinning, when both limbs are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's something to try to avoid. And sometimes it can work, but it all depends on context, but most of the time it doesn't. And obviously there I didn't like it. And I'm just kind of, you know, with standing poses, I do like to put an indication of a ground plane by like a cross or a grid. I just feel like it grounds the character, and I feel like that's important. I had a life drawing teacher who was a real stickler for that kind of stuff. She's like, draw the feet. The character's falling down. Do it again.
Well, like, I mean, you could probably draw that. You know, you could draw any character and then sort of just put a ground plane in. But the real key thing there is that if you need to draw something else, then you know where that goes as well. You know?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, storyboarding, grids are your friend.
Yep.
They are so important, and they help. They make your life so much easier. So, see that this pose was like, I don't know if you can see it, but this pose was like very static. Very, very twinny, actually, when I look at it again, because both limbs are doing this exact same thing. Whereas, see, this has a bit more like life. It's the same kind of idea. But it really looks like he's, you know.
There's more sort of. I guess there's more like energy to the pose.
There's more energy. Yeah. There's more like I don't know, purpose. You know.
I think someone's asking like why like standing poses, you know, sometimes, you know, boring compared to these active poses.
I think they're I wouldn't say boring. I'd say they're a lot harder to pull off, because they're a lot more subtle. There's a lot more subtle kind of weight things that are happening. You know, and usually it's about like an attitude. You know. But like, you should never, even in character design, you should never just like draw a character looking stiff. And just standing like this. you know.
Yeah,
it's just it's the literal worst.
Yeah,
you know, we're never just standing like that. It's, you know, we're always kind of like, you know, we have our weight on, you know, one side.
Yep.
We're always kind of shifting our weight.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things I talk about, and I think I talked about this at some point in one of the earlier streams, is that science tells us that we have mirror neurons, which are where if you see another human being doing a thing, essentially the same neurons that are firing in that person, if they do that thing, kind of involuntarily fire in your brain and your sort of nervous system. And I think a similar thing happens in drawing, right? Where if you see someone in a really sort of, especially if it's an iconic sort of cartoony character, which is very easy to relate to, right? Like Scott McCloud talks a lot about that in sort of understanding comics, where the simpler a character is, the easier it is for us to imagine that we are that character, you know, because even though this character is like, you know, a giant sort of bodybuilder, right? You know, he's sort of a bit cartoony, do you know what I mean? We can sort of imagine like, you know, I could maybe be that guy, or what would it be, right? And so I think what happens is that as we see these kind of characters in these sort of dynamic positions, is actually some of those sort of neurons are firing as if we were actually doing that. Do you know what I mean? You can kind of feel that tension, or you can feel that lack of tension, right, in your body. So when you see someone who's really like, your kind of body goes a bit like,
yeah. and that's a really, I think that's a really important thing. And I like is to, you know, as artists, we're kind of feeling our way through everything, every step of the way. We're like, does this feel right? Does this feel right? I know it sounds like super artsy fartsy when you're like, I'm feeling this way about it, but it is actually like one of the most important things. It's like your intuition about you know what you're doing, and that's why I think it's important to be present as when you're drawing. It seems you know, to be like, I know some people talk about, you know, having nice posture when you draw. I feel like that's really important. So you're not just like, you know, you're not just cranking up. You're not distracted. You're not just like watching a movie and like looking at that as you're trying to like draw. You know, just being present, I think is so important.
Sure.
Especially at this early stage when you're like, when you're trying to figure things out. Like there are some stages I feel like when I'm just like filling,
like inking the background of a comic.
Or inking the background, or
please, dear God, let me watch a movie so this is palatable.
Or like just filling in,
inking blacks in a comic or something, or
filling in the thing so I can color it. You know, filling in shapes,
flatting.
Like that is like brain numbing. So it is nice to have like a podcast on or something like that, I feel. But when I'm doing this stuff, I just really need to like feel it. Actually, my life drawing teacher was really great, because one thing she would get us to do is as the model was posing, she'd actually say to all the students, now I want you to get into that pose. I want you to feel what it's like to be in that pose, and then I want you to draw it. And I was like, that is
good advice.
That's really cool. I think that's really cool.
And it's probably advice I would have ignored as a 17-year-old. I'd be like, that sounds too artsy fartsy. But I find that, you know, and I certainly heard about that sort of stuff when I was sort of, you know, like early on, sort of developing my art skills and stuff like that. But yeah, it is, you kind of have to get into that mode. You know, if you want to draw a screaming, rage-fueled face, you kind of have to get into that mindset a little bit. You know, you have to kind of feel that feeling, you know what I mean? And I think it's very, no matter how consummate you are as a professional, and just being like, no, I can draw it, you know, with a lack of emotion, I think you're always going to betray the fact that you're not emotionally involved in that drawing. And I think that's often why, in many cases, a lot of artists are actually better at describing like the emotional feeling of a pose, right? Like that, like drawing someone who really looks like they're in that action pose or doing that thing or having that sort of attitude, is that they're almost better at doing that by not drawing structure. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like it's got nothing to do with the structure. It's just the way they kind of use line makes you think that's what that thing feels like to me.
Actually, and that's you bring up a really good point. That's actually why I do like this. It's intentionally not to have structure.
Yeah.
Because it's all about the feel.
Yep.
And I know I can overlay structure on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
But if I start building structure,
you kind of stop thinking about
it'll just kill the life.
Yeah. You're just drawing structure.
I'm just building structure. I'm building just forms upon forms.
And I think what happens is, I often say to students, is like what happens is your brain is now thinking structure, 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 structure.
Yes.
It's not thinking action, tension, muscles, rage, fury.
I mean, it is a bit about that, but also it's, but I'm thinking about that on a more like, micro level.
Yep.
Whereas I'm thinking,
it's in the background a bit more.
Yeah. Yep. Whereas this is still, I am thinking about structure, but
I think that's one of the reasons it's very tricky to begin doing this stuff, because you kind of almost have to do a bit too much thinking in the beginning. Before you kind of really have everything kind of dialed in, it can be very frustrating because you're sort of trying to think emotion, but then you kind of just don't have the skills to back it up, essentially. And so often what happens is like you kind of then have to step back and sort of start editing and be like, why doesn't this feel right? And it's like, oh, because I'm not drawing arms or cylinders or whatever, you know what I mean? And that kind of makes it hard to just sort of flow. So it is just a matter of sort of practicing to make sure that you've got those skills to just kind of channel weird, crazy emotions, you know what I mean? But I think it's a point where it's like, actors and movies and things like that can communicate, very well, where we can sort of emotionally relate to actors, but almost like a drawing gives us this ability to kind of make people feel things that maybe aren't possible, or are like kind of halfway in between, sort of realistic or unrealistic. It's kind of like you can sort of blend emotional feeling and all these kind of subtle things and make people literally feel things that they may not be able to feel any other way by sort of looking at a drawing.
Well, it's like
that's to get artsy. I just got artsy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like
but that's what's good about it, right? That's
absolutely.
That's why when people are like, "Oh no, everything's going to be realistic," it's kind of like, okay,
yep,
fine.
The thing is, like, even it's funny when talking about that. You see like the great fine artists, and you're like, wow, they actually caricatured things quite a lot. Like, I mean, Norman Rockwell, wow, like he really pushed his characters a lot. Like, like kids had these like big gangly feet. And it just looks amazing.
Pushing things.
They're pushing things so
really far.
Really far, yeah.
And it's just rendering it so nicely that you kind of don't notice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is, again, part of that thing. He's able to communicate it so much that you kind of don't really notice. But yeah, I mean, you can't shoot a movie of Norman Rockwell currently. You know what I mean? You might be able to do it in 3D, but
that'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool, actually. That's a good idea. Norman Rockwell 3D.
Let's see that.
Yeah, it would probably look like Uncanny Valley. Like,
it would
big time.
Just get Robert Zemeckis
bit terrifying.
But anyway, but talking about that again, like just quickly, one of my favorite artists is an animator called Milt Kahl.
Yep.
And he's one of the 9 old men of Disney.
Yep.
But I found it really interesting. He was considered one of the best draftsmen of all the Disney animators. But he would say, he's like, I don't feel like I'm a draftsman. I don't feel like I'm an artist. I feel like I'm an actor with a pencil.
Yep.
That's how he felt like he was just pretty much doing a performance.
Yep.
And the drawing was just a way of doing that.
Yep. Just business.
Just business. Yeah, exactly. But he was like, if you look at his drawings, they're insane. They're just so beautiful.
Yep.
From every aspect, really. It's quite stupid.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Awesome. Yeah. So again, you can probably Google Milt Kahl fairly easily and find something. 9 old men of Disney. So there's some good art there, I hear. Some good drawers.
Seriously.
Yeah.
They set the standard for what we do today. It's like, how crazy is it that they kind of set that?
Yep. Yeah. And still, I mean, we have good animators now, but they could still hold their own. You know what I mean? It's not like
easily.
they're sort of, you know, oh, we've moved on.
Nope. Nope.
Not really.
That stuff will live on forever.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this has been cool to see this sort of stuff, because this is the kind of thing that I don't do a lot of, and Simon doesn't do a lot of. So it's really cool to, you know, see this kind of process and hear your kind of approach, which is, again, I think one of the interesting things is just, you know, everyone has a different approach, you know, to art and stuff like that. And I think Pete's approach is always super interesting and refreshing. And I think it's always really cool to just, again, be reminded how fun drawing can be. I feel like when we catch up, I'm like, man, I just got to have more fun drawing. Not be sort of like, I got to draw Space Marines and make everyone look like a real badass and draw guns and stuff like that. It's kind of like, you're like, yeah, that's kind of silly.
Yep.
Anyway, cool. So yeah, thanks for coming on, Pete. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and drawing many large, muscly fishmen.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm talking about Kickstarter and all sorts of other random stuff. It's been awesome. So what are you going to do this week? You're kind of heading back to...
I'm going to work.
Going to work?
This week.
Working?
I'm working, but I'll be down here till Saturday.
Yep.
So I'm sharing an office with Ari, and she's making Hollow Knight, and
yep.
Yeah.
So traveling around, living the life as a freelance artist.
Guess so.
Yep.
Seeing how I go. This is the first time I've done it doing storyboards. So
right. Working on the road, so to speak.
On the road.
Yeah. So. Cool. Well, I hope that goes well. I'm going to continue trying to do Inktober and posting my successful Inktober drawings.
Yep.
But yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in. It's been really fun. We'll see you guys later.
Awesome. See you guys.